Hello there, and welcome back to the Sleep Science. You find yourself standing in a valley that hums like a living instrument. The air is colder than it should be, yet the soil radiates warmth through the soles of your shoes, as if the planet itself was sighing under its breath. Steam curls up from the ground in ghostly ribbons, twisting into the blue like incense from the nostrils of something impossibly large and ancient. You glance around. No smoke, no cities, no factories. Just the quiet pulse of the earth exhaling heat from somewhere far beneath your feet. You probably won't survive this if it decides to wake. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're watching from, and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The ground beneath you rises and falls almost imperceptibly, millimeters over the span of months, but to a satellite eye it's like watching a giant's ribcage shift under a blanket of stone. Yellowstone's caldera, that sprawling scar of prehistoric fury, is not a dormant volcano in the way people like to imagine. It's breathing, slowly, patiently, hungrily. Geologists call it uplift and subsidence, but that phrase feels far too polite for what's happening here. You can feel it, the push from below, the uneasy rhythm. As you walk along the edge of the basin, geysers hiss and mud pots burble. The air sharp with the tang of sulfur. Each sound feels like punctuation from the depths. Beneath the crust, molten rock and superheated water churn in a restless marriage. The magma chamber, a reservoir roughly 40 miles wide, is swelling ever so slightly, feeding the geysers, stretching the crust like skin over a drum. Scientists have measured this motion for decades, their instruments catching tiny shifts that make headlines once in a while, usually accompanied by phrases like Supervolcano awakening. Historians still argue whether it's fair to call Yellowstone a time bomb, or simply a geological wonder that happens to live on the edge of catastrophe. The ground exhales again, a puff of warmth against your ankles. You picture the magma far below, glowing orange like a buried sun, its gases seeking escape. Every few thousand years it finds one, sometimes in a spectacular eruption, other times in a quiet venting through fumaroles. The last true cataclysm here, about 640,000 years ago, ejected enough material to bury half the continent in ash. Humanity didn't exist yet. Our ancestors were just beginning to learn what fire was. The planet learned the hard way. You stop beside a pool so clear it seems almost alive, blue fading into green, ringed by orange mats of thermophilic bacteria that shimmer like melted jewels. A ranger once told you that if you dropped your hand in, it would cook instantly. The microbes, though, thrive there, dining on sulfur and iron. They've been doing so for millions of years, oblivious to the fragile creatures that take selfies above them. It's strange how life always finds comfort at the edge of annihilation. The wind carries the faint metallic scent of minerals, iron, copper, arsenic, like the perfume of the planet's blood. Somewhere beneath you, tectonic plates are still grinding, nudging and flexing over a mantle plume that's been rising since before mammals existed. The mantle plume, scientists believe, is what feeds this entire system, a narrow column of molten material pushing upward from the core mantle boundary, stubbornly punching through the moving crust above. Over millions of years, as the North American plate drifted, this plume left a trail of extinct calderas stretching from Oregon to Wyoming, each one a historical footprint of an ancient inferno. You crouch, resting a hand on the ground. It's warm to the touch, and you imagine the magma's heartbeat pulsing faintly through it, like feeling your pulse through a wrist. There's an odd intimacy in that connection. You and the volcano sharing a circulatory system, both of you pressurized and finite. The first explorers here, long before Yellowstone had a name, must have thought they'd stumbled into the mouth of creation itself. Steam, sulfur, boiling mud. The landscape seemed impossible, alive. The Crow people called it the land where the smoke comes out. To them, it was sacred, not terrifying. Europeans, of course, later dubbed it the place where hell boils over, because humans tend to label what they don't understand as something infernal. Both descriptions are true in their own way. You take another slow step and the soil crunches faintly under your boots, fragile crust over thermal ground that could collapse if you misstep. Somewhere nearby, a geyser bursts skyward, its roar echoing through the trees, a column of vapour rising like an exclamation from the underworld. The spectacle draws applause from tourists, their cameras flashing like fireflies. They cheer, unaware that this breath of steam is just a harmless fraction of the pressure building below. A fringe theory you once read, one that geologists mostly roll their eyes at, suggests that the supervolcano breathes in a cycle of roughly 700,000 years, almost like a planetary heartbeat. According to that math, it's technically due for another major exhale. Scientists dismiss the notion of a fixed schedule, pointing instead to complex interactions of magma, crust and gas as the real triggers. Still, that little whisper of inevitability lingers in the back of your mind, like the tick of a clock you can't quite ignore. Somewhere far above, a hawk circles lazily in the thermal updrafts, gliding on invisible rivers of warmth. You envy it for a moment, its effortless grace, its distance from the anxiety of what lies below. From up there, the land probably looks peaceful, its scars hidden beneath forests and rivers. But from where you stand, the peace feels deceptive, the silence too rehearsed. Night begins to fall, and the basin glows faintly, lit from below by geothermal light. You sit on a rock still radiating the day's heat, the air humming softly with the sound of escaping steam. It feels alive. The Earth, you realise, is not a dead sphere we happen to inhabit. It's a living engine, complex, temperamental, and occasionally catastrophic. You stare at the horizon, wondering what it means that we live on borrowed calm. The ground exhales again. This time you think you can feel it in your chest. You wake to a faint tremor, the kind that barely nudges your sense of balance yet somehow ripples through your bones like a whispered reminder. The air smells faintly metallic again, ozone and sulphur, the perfume of the deep earth. Somewhere nearby, a raven croaks once and goes quiet, wings slicing the morning chill. The basin stretches before you, veiled in mist, its surface calm yet alive with hidden murmurs. Scientists call these whispers microseisms, tiny vibrations, so subtle you'd never feel them without a seismometer. But taken together, they're like the Earth's pulse, a Morse code tapping through layers of stone. You picture rows of delicate instruments scattered across the caldera, thin silver rods planted in the ground, wires snaking like veins to small grey boxes. They sit out here through snow and thunder, patiently listening to what the Earth has to say. Each tick, each rumble, each echo bouncing through the crust tells a story. Sometimes it's magma shifting in its chamber, sometimes it's just rock settling, like an old house groaning in its sleep. Historians still argue whether the patterns, clusters of quakes, repeating rhythms, should be read as omens or as background chatter. The debate has been going on since the first geologists arrived in the 19th century, lugging brass instruments and wild theories about the breathing mountain. One of them, Ferdinand Hayden, described the ground as alive with subterranean percussion. He wasn't wrong. You stand perfectly still, eyes closed, and try to hear it too. It's almost there. A low, continuous thrum. Maybe it's your imagination, or maybe it's the magma chamber below, humming like a distant engine. The sound doesn't frighten you. It feels familiar, like a heartbeat you've known all along but never stopped to notice. As the sun climbs, steam plumes drift sideways, revealing patches of bare earth fractured into hexagonal patterns. Each crack is an old scar, etched by cycles of expansion and cooling. You crouch and run your fingers along one, warm to the touch, faintly damp. It reminds you of the skin on cooling bread, rising and falling as heat escapes. The earth is baking itself from within. You start walking again, following a boardwalk that snakes across the thermal field. Beneath the planks, the ground gurgles softly, the sound of water boiling in pockets a few meters down. The combination of pressure and heat forces that water up through fractures, creating geysers and mud pots. To the untrained eye, it looks random, chaotic. But to a volcanologist, every bubble, every hiss is part of a pattern. You remember reading about the seismic swarm of 2018, hundreds of small quakes rippling through Yellowstone in a single summer. Nothing catastrophic happened, but the swarm triggered global headlines, the kind written to make coffee taste suddenly urgent. Supervolcano awakening? Is humanity ready? The answer, you suspect, is no. Humanity isn't ready for its Wi-Fi to drop for 5 minutes, let alone the sky to turn to ash. Still, You can't help smiling at the drama of it. The Earth burps and the world panics. Somewhere, a YouTuber is definitely already streaming from a thermal vent titled 24 hours on top of a supervolcano, gone wrong. It's easy to laugh, but the truth behind the spectacle is sobering. Seismic data does tell us things. Magma movement, crustal stress, even potential eruption precursors, but not everything. Volcanoes are stubbornly private creatures. They murmur constantly, but rarely in full sentences. The US Geological Survey maintains an entire branch devoted to monitoring this region, their computers pinging every time a tremor registers. They analyse waveforms, compare amplitudes, track frequencies, trying to distinguish magma motion from tectonic noise, like trying to tell footsteps from wind in an empty house. Every once in a while, though, the house creaks a little too loudly. That's when everyone starts glancing nervously at the exits. A curious fringe theory suggests that the supervolcano sends acoustic precursors days or weeks before an eruption. Subtle, inaudible vibrations that animals can sense but humans can't. It's the kind of thing you'd expect in folklore, yet biologists have noted that bison and elk sometimes migrate away from thermal zones weeks before heightened activity. Coincidence? Maybe, but maybe not. Historians still argue whether ancient peoples, those who lived in volcanic lands before modern instruments, learned to read those cues better than we do. Perhaps the myths of angry mountains weren't superstition at all, but coded warnings from people who listened. You pause beside a fumarole vent, the ground hissing softly at you, a breath of invisible gas that smells faintly of rotten eggs and pennies. The air shimmers. You imagine it whispering, "Don't get too close." The steam rises like a spectral curtain, and for a fleeting second you see patterns in it. Faces, maybe, or just tricks of heat and light. You laugh quietly at yourself. You've been staring at rocks too long. In 1980, Mount St. Helens reminded everyone how easily beauty turns violent. The mountain had been quiet for over a century, its flanks covered in fur and snow. Then came the swelling, the tremors, the gases, the coded warnings, all ignored. When it finally blew, it wasn't lava that killed, but pressure. An explosion so fast it flattened 230 square miles in seconds. Scientists learned a lot from that disaster, yet even today, predicting eruptions remains like trying to predict someone's next sneeze from the rise of their shoulders. You step off the boardwalk for a moment, standing on firmer ground. The forest here is thick and old, pine needles cushioning your steps. But even here, where everything seems solid, sensors hidden among the trees continue to listen. Fibre optic cables run underground, translating Earth's murmurs into graphs and models. Somewhere in a lab, someone's watching those squiggly lines and sipping cold coffee, wondering if the latest tremor means anything at all. You take a slow breath, and the air tastes faintly of ash, though there hasn't been a real eruption here in human history. Maybe it's imagination, or memory, the land remembering what fire felt like. You think about that. Memory stored in stone, replayed as vibration. The Earth keeps its diary in seismic code, and every quake is an entry. Still here, still restless. You press your palm against a boulder still warm from below, and for a brief moment you think you feel something tapping back. You keep your hand against the rock for a few heartbeats longer, half expecting it to answer again. It doesn't, of course, though the warmth lingers on your skin, travelling up your wrist like a pulse. That heat isn't surface magic. It's a letter mailed upward from a vast ocean of molten rock, a reminder that everything beneath your feet is, quite literally, simmering. Below the quiet crust lies the hidden ocean of fire. Imagine it. A chamber stretching more than 60 kilometers long, 13 thick, filled with semi-molten magma and gas, swirling in sluggish convection. It's not a tidy cavern of lava like movie posters promise, but a sponge of partially melted rock, honey-thick, glowing in patches where pressure gathers. Somewhere within that mass, tiny crystals form and melt in endless rhythm, marking time like geological clockwork. You're standing above the world's most patient storm. Scientists have mapped this subterranean body using seismic tomography, the geological equivalent of a CT scan. They send waves through the Earth, measure how they bend, and reconstruct an image of what lies beneath. The results reveal two reservoirs stacked like lungs, an upper one of sticky, eruptible magma, and a deeper one, larger and hotter, that feeds it like a furnace feeding a forge. Historians still argue whether these dual chambers act as separate systems or one connected organism waiting for the right breath to synchronize. The discovery caused a small uproar in the mid-2000s when a University of Utah team realized the lower chamber was nearly 5 times larger than previously thought. It was as if someone had opened a closet and found an extra basement under it, one that had been burning since before the Rocky Mountains rose. News outlets, predictably, turned that into supervolcano bigger than we feared, while geologists sighed into their coffee mugs. The truth is, the chamber didn't grow. We just learned to see more of it. You picture it now, a slow-moving sea of magma pulsing through the Earth's veins. Above it, pockets of gas accumulate, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, water vapor, forming bubbles that strain against their rocky cage. The chemistry is complicated, like an angry souffle that no one dares open the oven to check on. The moment pressure overcomes resistance, the chamber will vent in a spectacular, chaotic chain reaction. But for now, the lid holds, barely. There's an odd comfort in knowing that such violence sleeps beneath serenity. The forests and meadows above are vibrant, elk grazing, tourists snapping selfies beside geysers, bison lounging in hot fog like prehistoric kings at a spa. Life, perfectly oblivious, living its routines atop an apocalypse in slow motion. You can't help but smile at the absurdity of it all, like balancing a picnic blanket over a nuclear reactor because the view is nice. A soft tremor ripples through the soil again, nothing serious. Just a hiccup in the crust. You imagine magma pushing slightly upward, searching for an easier path. Sometimes it finds one in a new hydrothermal vent or a steaming crack. Other times it simply waits, letting heat build. These micro-movements constantly reshape the chamber's internal pressure, creating what volcanologists affectionately call charging. The volcano, they say, is charging like a battery, a terrifying planet-sized battery. There's a fringe theory, half dismissed but strangely poetic, that suggests supervolcanoes inhale and exhale over tens of thousands of years. When the magma cools slightly, it contracts, pulling the crust downward. When it reheats, it expands, lifting the land like a slow tide. From that rhythm comes the illusion of breath, the heartbeat you felt earlier. You think of the magma as blood, the crust as bone, and realize the planet's anatomy isn't so different from your own. Both need pressure, both crave release. You sit near a bubbling pool, the steam wrapping you in its sulphurous embrace. The air feels heavy, damp, ancient. Beneath your thoughts, a question hums. What triggers eruption? It isn't just temperature. It's a volatile dance between gas, viscosity, and fractures. The magma here is rich in silica, thick as cold honey, trapping gases that thinner lava would let slip. As pressure builds, it reaches a point where the gases can't stay dissolved. They burst free, expanding violently, what scientists call exsolution. It's like opening a shaken soda bottle the size of a continent. The result is not a river of lava, but a detonation of ash and rock so vast it can alter climates. One mainstream historical fact floats into your mind. When Mount Tambora erupted in 1815, it blasted so much ash into the atmosphere that global temperatures dropped for an entire year. Europe and North America called it the year without a summer. Crops failed, skies dimmed, and desperate poets, Lord Byron among them, wrote apocalyptic verses while snow fell in June. Yellowstone's potential, by comparison, is 1,000 times that scale. A chill runs up your spine despite the warmth rising from below. Still, no one knows when or even if it will happen again. Some geologists suggest the magma's upper chamber isn't molten enough for an eruption anytime soon. Others caution that anytime soon, in geological terms, could mean tomorrow or 10,000 years. Historians still argue whether our obsession with prediction is science or superstition wearing a lab coat. You glance around at the landscape, the surreal rainbow of thermal pools, the petrified trees crusted in minerals, the endless hiss of vents, and think of how this place has already erupted multiple times. The current caldera is just the latest scar in a chain that stretches back 16 million years. Each eruption carved and refilled the earth like a sculptor never satisfied with their work. The Snake River Plain, stretching west across Idaho, is a gallery of those former masterpieces, every crater a memory of fire. You can almost feel the ancient eruptions echoing under your feet, ghosts of pressure long spent. Somewhere in those echoes, There's a lesson about patience. The magma waits. It doesn't rage. It simply gathers, adapting to the laws of physics as faithfully as rain obeys gravity. You lie back on the warm earth, staring at a sky so clear it feels endless. Clouds drift lazily overhead, as if they too are exhalations from the caldera below. The faint smell of sulfur is oddly comforting now. You think of all the layers between you and that molten sea, rock, crystal, silence, and realize how thin the distance really is. Maybe that's why this place humbles people. Beneath the hiking trails, beneath the gift shops and picnic tables, there's a reminder that everything solid in your life, cities, countries, species, is temporary scaffolding over forces older than memory. You close your eyes and imagine that ocean of magma stirring, a crimson tide rolling in slow motion. It doesn't threaten you directly, it simply exists, immense and indifferent. And yet, lying here, you can't help feeling connected to it. One heartbeat syncing with another, one breath shared between flesh and flame. The rock beneath you vibrates once more, gentle, like a whisper saying, "I'm still here." The vibration fades into stillness, and you feel yourself sink into the silence it leaves behind. It's the kind of quiet that isn't truly empty, more like the pause between two breaths. The morning mist begins to thin, revealing the full stretch of the caldera rim ahead of you. From here, the landscape looks serene, even idyllic. Forests, lakes, and pale meadows stitched together under the big Wyoming sky. But your mind drifts backward, imagining what this same view would have looked like on the day the world ended, at least this corner of it. The time before Ash wasn't peaceful. It was chaotic, beautiful, and briefly illuminated by fire. Around 640,000 years ago, Yellowstone roared in an eruption so vast that modern humans would have measured it in units of disbelief. The blast hurled more than 1,000 cubic kilometers of rock and ash into the sky, enough to blanket half of North America beneath a thick, choking grey. The eruption column reached the stratosphere, turning day into night. The Earth itself dimmed, sunlight scattering through airborne glass and dust until the world glowed a sickly amber. If you could have stood here then, if you could somehow survive long enough to witness it, you'd have seen lightning tearing through the ash clouds, volcanic thunder rolling across continents. The air temperature would have plunged within days, rivers boiled dry and forests turned to kindling. The sound alone would have been beyond comprehension, a pressure wave that could flatten mountains, and after that, silence again, but not peace, only aftermath. Historians still argue whether early hominins elsewhere in the world noticed any effect. Some evidence suggests global cooling rippled outward, altering rainfall and ecosystems as far away as Africa. Others claim the eruption's climate impact, while devastating regionally, faded within decades. Either way, the Earth shuddered, recovered, and went on, like a fever breaking. You step carefully along the rim, feeling gravel crunch underfoot, and try to picture that prehistoric apocalypse in reverse. The ash settling, the smoke thinning, the crater slowly cooling into a vast depression that would one day host life again. Steam vents would have persisted for centuries, their hiss the lullaby of a wounded planet. Then, rain, endless rain, washing minerals into new rivers, carving channels through the soft volcanic ash. Over thousands of years, the basin would green again, plants taking root in nutrient-rich soil. From destruction came abundance. It's strange how the Earth recycles its disasters. Every cataclysm is also a beginning. You glance down at a patch of wildflowers, Indian paintbrush, goldenrod, lupine, all swaying in a breeze scented faintly of brimstone. Their roots sip from the same mineral veins that once glowed molten. They're children of fire wearing spring colours. A raven lands on a nearby post, cocking its head at you as if to ask what you're doing here, remembering things that don't belong to you. You nod at it, silently conceding the point. Memory here is geological, not human. The land remembers in layers. Ash turned to clay, clay hardened to tuff, tuff buried beneath newer eruptions. Each layer is an entry in the planet's diary, though you need patience measured in millennia to read it. And yet, even without reading, you feel it. The quiet weight of time presses on everything, the rocks, the air, your pulse. Somewhere deep down, magma still shifts, carrying with it the chemical signature of those ancient eruptions. Scientists can trace those isotopes like fingerprints, confirming that the same system that once darkened the world still thrums beneath your feet. You recall a quirky bit of fringe geology that made its way through conferences years ago. The claim that supervolcanoes operate in emotional cycles, moods, determined by feedback between crustal stress and magma buoyancy. The theory was dismissed, of course. Volcanoes aren't alive in any conscious sense, but standing here, you could almost believe they are. The land feels contemplative today, its breath slow, its heartbeat steady. Give it another few thousand years though, and who knows, maybe it will wake grumpy again. A gust of wind rushes across the ridge, tugging at your jacket. The sky's clear now, impossibly blue, and yet you imagine what it would look like filled with ash. A second sun rising in the west, painting the horizon red. The thought gives you goosebumps. Not fear exactly, but awe, the kind that humbles you right down to the molecules. The last time Yellowstone erupted, the fallout covered parts of what would become Nebraska in ash meters deep. Fossilized trees there still bear the marks. Silica replaced trunks, frozen mid-growth like ghosts caught in mid-sentence. The ash travelled east, mingling with atmospheric currents, drifting across oceans. In ice cores from Greenland, faint traces of that eruption remain, microscopic reminders of a disaster 500,000 years gone. It's as if the planet left breadcrumbs to remind itself. I have done this before. You kneel, tracing a piece of volcanic tuff embedded in the soil, the rock smooth and pitted like hardened bread crust. It crumbles easily under your touch, so fragile, yet born of something unstoppable. You can't help but think of human history, our civilizations, our wars, our fragile empires, and how all of it will someday compress into another thin layer of ash in the Earth's record. A future geologist might look back and say, here's where they lived, here's where they burned. You exhale slowly. The wind carries your breath away, scattering it into the cold air like another layer of memory. Still, even after imagining all that destruction, there's something reassuring about the rhythm of it. Eruption, silence, rebirth. Catastrophe isn't the end of the world, it's just how the planet changes its clothes. Life returns, always. Somewhere in the distance, a geyser erupts with a shriek of steam, startling the raven into flight. It arcs upward, black wings slicing the sunlight, and you watch until it vanishes against the blue. Maybe that's what recovery looks like, rising from the smoke, carrying the story skyward. The ground beneath you is calm again. No tremors, no sighs, only the faint warmth rising through the soles of your boots, as if the earth were whispering a lullaby to itself. You close your eyes and listen, and for a moment you can almost hear the echoes of that ancient roar, muted now, softened by eons, a memory retold through the gentle hiss of steam. The planet sleeps, but it never forgets. You walk along the slope, tracing the curve of a world that built itself through calamity. Every ridge, every cliff, every steaming pool is a paragraph in the manual of how to build a supervolcano, and you, for better or worse, are now reading it cover to cover. The breeze carries a thin veil of mist, laced with minerals that sting faintly at the back of your throat. It smells like chemistry class, like the first hint that the Earth is not content being solid. The instructions start deep, miles below your feet, where the mantle roils in slow-motion waves of molten rock. It's a strange thing to imagine. The interior of the planet isn't uniform but textured, restless, full of convection currents that churn like the surface of a sun you never see. These rising plumes, columns of heat that have been climbing for tens of millions of years, are the first architects of supervolcanoes. One of them, persistent and proud, found its way under what we now call Yellowstone. You picture that plume as a slow vertical river of fire pushing gently upward into the thick, brittle crust. As it meets resistance, it spreads laterally, melting the rock around it into glowing mush. That's the blueprint. Step 1, create weakness. Step 2, fill it with magma until it begins to bulge. Historians still argue whether mantle plumes are stationary fixtures or moving anomalies. Some geophysicists claim they're rooted deep in the planet, unbothered by surface drift. Others suggest they wander, interacting with tectonic plates like dance partners changing tempo. Whatever the truth, the Yellowstone hotspot has been remarkably loyal. It's carved a dotted trail of ancient calderas from Oregon to Wyoming, marking the slow eastward crawl of the North American plate. The scars line up neatly, like the footprints of a patient arsonist. You glance down at your boots and wonder, what would it feel like to stand at the center of such creation? You already are. The thought is both thrilling and deeply uncomfortable. The third ingredient in the recipe is time, absurd, inhuman amounts of it. It takes millions of years for magma to accumulate, evolve, and build the volatile chemistry that makes eruptions catastrophic instead of ordinary. Each cycle adds new layers of silica, volatile gases, and trapped water. It's geological patience at its finest, the slow brewing of a pressure cooker that refuses to whistle until it's far too late. You imagine the process like baking, crust as dough, magma as filling. Every few 100,000 years, the planet opens the oven door to check, sometimes releasing a puff of gas, sometimes letting the entire thing explode. It's a terrible bakery, but at least the products are impressive. You stop beside a fumarole venting steam that smells faintly of wet copper. It whispers, the kind of whisper that seems to say, "Keep watching, you haven't seen the whole trick yet." You crouch, feeling the warmth against your face. The rock around the vent is discoloured. Yellow streaks of sulphur, black crusts of manganese, rainbow sheens where minerals have leached and dried. It's both beautiful and poisonous, like art made from danger. Nearby, a plaque explains that hydrothermal systems like this are safety valves for the volcano. They release small amounts of heat and gas that would otherwise add to the pressure below. In essence, the geysers and hot springs are the volcano's sweat glands. The irony isn't lost on you. People travel from all over the world to admire what are essentially the pores of a potentially world-ending machine. A century ago, geologist Thomas Jagger, one of the early founders of modern volcanology, once wrote, "The study of volcanoes is the study of pressure made visible." You whisper that to yourself, letting the words hang in the steam. Pressure made visible. You think of the tiny quakes, the swelling ground, the venting gases, all parts of an ancient machine constantly recalibrating itself. The longer it holds, the more impressive its eventual release. There's a fringe idea floating in the scientific grey zone that supervolcanoes require not just geological pressure, but a kind of rhythmic breathing space. Epochs of quiet during which their systems reorganize, crystallizing slowly to recharge energy. Some volcanologists roll their eyes at the metaphor, but others secretly like it. It makes the Earth sound like a composer, pausing between symphonies. You step back from the vent and follow a winding trail through pale, barren ground. The trees thin, replaced by hardened flows of rhyolite, ancient lava, glassy and brittle. When sunlight hits at the right angle, the surface sparkles faintly, almost metallic. These flows are remnants of smaller eruptions that occurred long after the big one, proof that the volcano never truly stopped. It just shifted from screaming to murmuring. Farther ahead, the terrain dips into a canyon where obsidian litters the path in glossy shards. You pick up a piece, black, sharp, so smooth it reflects your face. This is called magma too, but quenched so fast it turned to volcanic glass. Ancient peoples prized obsidian for arrowheads and tools. You can see why. It's beautiful, deadly, and precise. Civilization's first mirrors were made from stone like this. The reflection stares back at you, warped slightly by its curved surface. For a moment it looks like you're peering into a dark eye. You slip the shard back onto the ground. Building a supervolcano isn't just a geological accident, it's an inevitability of planetary design. The Earth needs ways to vent, to recycle, to reinvent itself. Volcanoes are part of that immune system, purging heat and remaking landscapes. It's not personal, it's maintenance. Humans just happen to live during the quiet hours between eruptions. Lucky timing. The trail bends toward a ridge, offering a panoramic view of the basin. The geyser fields stretch below like steaming lungs, and the mountains in the distance glint under the noon sun. You squint, trying to imagine the crust below, not as solid, but as a living layer of tension. Somewhere down there, crystals are forming, gases are separating, magma is shifting from syrup to chaos. The system is alive, patient, methodical. You remember a debate you overheard once at a science conference livestream. Two volcanologists arguing whether Yellowstone is a supervolcano at all. One claimed the label is fear-mongering, since the term has no strict scientific definition. The other insisted that the magnitude of its past eruptions earns the title, whether we like it or not. The argument spiraled, ending with someone muttering that humans always need to name the things that might kill them. It gives the illusion of control. You lean on a railing and watch steam rise in lazy curls, blending with clouds above. For a brief moment, it's impossible to tell where Earth ends and sky begins. Maybe that's the whole point. This place blurs every line: creation and destruction, beauty and danger, stillness and motion. You exhale, and the air carries your breath upward, joining the steam in its endless escape. You wonder how many times this same air has cycled. Through eruptions, through lungs, through centuries. The planet breathes, and you breathe with it. One slow inhale, one slow exhale. The first rule of building a supervolcano: never stop breathing. You descend from the ridge into the wide basin again, where the Earth's warmth lingers in the air like invisible mist. Here, amid the hissing vents and the kaleidoscope of mineral pools, life has staked a claim in the most improbable ways. Every puddle, every crack, every bubble seems to hold something alive, something evolving. It's the part of the story that most visitors miss, that beneath the sulfur and the heat, this place is quietly rewriting the rules of biology. A faint hiss to your left draws your attention to a small acidic spring. Its edges are rimmed with brilliant orange mats of microbes, the colours almost neon against the pale ground. The smell, sharp, metallic, almost like vinegar left in the sun, stings your nose as you crouch closer. If this were any other place, you'd expect it to be sterile. But here, in the boiling toxic water, entire ecosystems thrive. They're called thermophiles, heat-loving organisms that consider boiling temperatures a comfy afternoon. Some survive at 90 degrees Celsius, others push the limits past the boiling point, living in microscopic colonies that shimmer like oil slicks. Scientists discovered many of these species right here in Yellowstone, their DNA unlike anything found in cooler, gentler places. You remember reading about one in particular, Thermus aquaticus, the microbe that gave the world Taq polymerase, the enzyme behind the modern miracle of DNA replication. Without that tiny survivor from this infernal landscape, the entire field of genetic research, and yes, even your at-home ancestry kits, might not exist. It's strange, you think, how our greatest scientific tools are born in boiling acid. You trail a finger just above the surface of the pool, feeling the warmth radiate through the steam. The air vibrates faintly, as if humming. It's almost melodic, the sound of gas escaping in rhythmic puffs. Around you, insects buzz, and a bird trills somewhere beyond the fog. Life is everywhere, thriving at the edge of impossible. Historians still argue whether early indigenous peoples of this region understood the microbial richness of these springs in a spiritual sense. The Shoshone and Bannock tribes revered the steaming pools as sacred, calling them the breath of the earth. To them, the heat was not hostile, it was healing. They bathed in some of the cooler springs, used the mineral waters for medicine, and wove the phenomenon into stories about renewal and rebirth. Even without microscopes, they understood that the land's fever had purpose. You smile, imagining those first encounters between humans and geothermal life. The awe, the respect, the careful boundary. Today's tourists, armed with cameras and sneakers, don't seem to carry the same reverence. A few lean over barriers to snap the perfect photo, ignoring warning signs about fragile ground and scalding water. The park rangers call it volcanic natural selection. You chuckle, though the joke lands darkly. A gust of wind clears the steam for a moment, revealing a herd of bison grazing in the distance, their shaggy coats damp with condensation. They move slowly, deliberately, as if this were any other meadow. Now and then, one steps through a thin crust, releasing a puff of steam that curls around its legs. The bison barely react. They've lived here for millennia, unbothered by the heat, the sulfur, the occasional tremor. You can't help but admire their calm. Some scientists believe the animals are drawn to the warmth beneath the soil during winter, when the rest of the landscape freezes solid. It's a practical choice, though it gives rise to the eerie sight of steaming herds in snowstorms, black silhouettes moving through fog, ghostly and ancient. It reminds you of a fringe claim you once stumbled across online, that the bison's behavior could predict volcanic activity. In 2014, a viral video showed a herd running along a road away from the park, and rumors exploded that Yellowstone was about to erupt. Geologists had to issue statements clarifying that the animals were just migrating early. Still, the myth persists, proof that in the human imagination, every motion here becomes prophecy. You walk toward a cluster of geysers, their rhythmic eruptions punctuating the quiet. Each burst sends a plume of hot water skyward, shimmering in the sunlight before falling as warm rain. The ground trembles faintly underfoot with every cycle, as if applauding its own display. The largest geyser nearby, aptly named Grand, erupts with clockwork precision every 7 to 15 hours. Its plume can reach the height of a 10-story building. You decide to wait. The minutes stretch, filled with small sounds, burbles, sighs, the low hum of escaping steam. Then, suddenly, the earth below you growls, a deep rumble like thunder underfoot. The vent swells. Then, boom! A column of water and vapor explodes upward, roaring into the sky. You laugh out loud, the sound snatched away by wind and mist. For a few moments you're soaked in volcanic rain, and it feels absurdly good. As the eruption subsides, a fine drizzle coats your hair and jacket. You tilt your head back, catching droplets on your tongue. The taste is bitter, mineral heavy. You grimace, then grin. Not great drinking water, but it feels like a baptism in the older sense, being reminded that you're made of the same elements boiling below. A historical fact bubbles up in your mind. In the 19th century, early explorers dubbed this place Hell's Half Acre, convinced it was a gateway to the underworld. Yet, curiously, they also found it beautiful. Terrible, yes, but beautiful. The contradiction feels right. You feel it too. You wander past the geysers, letting the steam cloak you again. The warmth against your skin feels alive, almost protective. You can't help but wonder if the microbes sense you as part of the ecosystem, a temporary guest of flesh among colonies that have outlived continents. The ground hums faintly again, a reminder that this beauty depends on a pressure system measured in unimaginable tons. You think about that, how every tranquil pool, every thriving microbe, every grazing bison exists because magma far below is still churning. Life here doesn't resist the volcano, it grows because of it. You stop, close your eyes, and let the warmth wash over you. For the briefest moment, you can almost believe the land is speaking. A slow, steady whisper that says, "See, even in the furnace, there's grace." You open your eyes again, steam rising all around, and smile. The air is alive with breath. So are you. You follow a path toward a cluster of low buildings and metallic towers rising from the tree line. They look out of place, tiny outposts of circuitry and steel amid geysers and mud. This is the human observatory, the nerve center of our curiosity, where scientists listen to the planet's heartbeat and try to translate it into something we can understand. The instruments blink quietly, their antennas pointed toward the sky as though eavesdropping on invisible messages. From a distance, the scene feels almost monastic. A few researchers move slowly between the equipment, bundled in bright parkas, their breath turning to vapor in the cold morning air. They speak in low tones, checking readouts, jotting notes on waterproof tablets. You get the sense that they're caretakers as much as scientists, tending to the sensors like gardeners of data. One of them waves as you approach, pointing out the thin wire running across the ground. "Fiber strain gauge," she says. "It measures ground expansion. Right now, the basin's rising about 2 centimeters a year." You nod, pretending that number means something to your nervous system, though you can't help picturing it as the earth taking in a slow, deep breath. Beneath her calm explanation hides something close to reverence. Everyone here knows the scale of what they're studying. The Yellowstone Volcano Observatory, part of the US Geological Survey, is a network of minds devoted to watching for the slightest twitch of this giant below. They monitor seismographs, gas emissions, thermal imagery, satellite data, even the chemistry of the rivers. If magma so much as sighs, they'll hear it. Historians still argue whether this kind of monitoring is science or superstition in disguise. After all, volcanoes are notoriously hard to predict. You can know that pressure is building, but not when it will break. Yet humans have always been drawn to the edge of uncertainty. Maybe that's why this observatory exists, to soothe our collective anxiety with spreadsheets and graphs, to remind us that ignorance doesn't have to mean helplessness. You ask one of the scientists, a middle-aged volcanologist with the weathered look of someone who's spent decades squinting at steam, what it feels like to study something that could erase entire states. He chuckles softly. Honestly? Comforting. You can't fear what you've dedicated your life to understanding. Then, after a beat, he adds, "Well, maybe a little." He hands you a tablet showing a live seismic feed. The graph dances in thin green lines, steady with minor wiggles. Microquakes, he says. Hundreds every month. The magma shifts, the crust flexes. The system talks all the time. It just rarely shouts. He zooms in on a cluster near the northern rim. That's new this week. Probably nothing. Or the start of something. That's the problem with volcanology. Everything's probably nothing until it isn't. You grin, half nervous, half thrilled. There's a strange serenity in that uncertainty. A fringe experiment, one not officially endorsed but quietly pursued, attempts to record infrasonic frequencies, the subaudible rumbles that travel through both ground and sky. Some researchers believe these low frequencies might hold predictive clues, the planet's warning murmurs before the big roar. They even nicknamed the system the Earth's whisper mic. The idea sounds poetic, maybe even mystical, but you find comfort in it. Humans have always tried to make the Earth talk back. You walk along a row of small metal domes, GPS receivers, each one recording infinitesimal changes in elevation. To the naked eye, the ground looks still, but these machines reveal motion everywhere. The land swelling, contracting, pulsing. The scientists show you a time-lapse map on another screen. The colours bloom and fade like breath, the caldera rising and falling with the years. You can almost hear the inhale, the exhale. The volcanologist points to one particularly active patch on the map. That's where the uplift is strongest right now, she says. Could mean magma's moving upward. Could mean gases are accumulating. Could just be the Earth stretching. You see why this job keeps you humble. In the corner of the station, a coffee machine gurgles beside stacks of printouts. On the wall, someone's taped a meme, a cartoon volcano holding a mug saying, "Don't worry, I'm fine." You can't help but laugh. Even here, among data and danger, humour survives. As the team checks readings, you notice how quiet they become during certain moments. Those times when a graph line flutters unexpectedly, or a sensor pings off pattern. The silence that follows is almost ritualistic, like a prayer in an unspoken language. You realise that for them, each anomaly is a kind of sermon from the deep. You step outside, leaving them to their vigil. The cold air bites your face, a welcome contrast to the heat that radiates from vents nearby. A crow perches on one of the instruments, head cocked as though trying to understand human obsession. Maybe it already does. You look out over the valley, steam drifting lazily, geysers erupting in the distance, and wonder if the volcano knows it's being watched. The thought makes you smile. If it does, it probably finds us adorable, our fragile machines measuring its breath while it slumbers. You remember reading that during the Cold War, satellites first mapped Yellowstone's uplift not out of curiosity, but suspicion. The early data came from spy satellites tracking ground deformation, which analysts mistook for secret military testing. The real revelation, that the ground itself was the weapon, came later. Sometimes, you think, humanity discovers truth only while looking for ways to outdo itself. The wind shifts, carrying the sound of a geyser's roar across the plain. It sounds like applause, faint but distinct. You imagine the volcano clapping for the scientists, its most devoted audience. Inside again, one researcher shows you a series of thermal images. Reds and oranges bloom like embers across a black map. That's yesterday's satellite paths, she explains. You can see where heat escapes through fractures. It's beautiful, right? You nod, though beauty feels like the wrong word for something that could one day blanket the sky in ash. Still, you see what she means. It is beautiful, like the glow of a sleeping dragon's scales. She leans back in her chair and sighs. You know, we'll probably never see it erupt in our lifetime. You glance at her, unsure whether to feel relieved or disappointed. She smiles, reading your thought. That's the curse of studying something that works in epochs. We're mayflies staring at a thunderstorm. Outside, the wind rises again, and a few flakes of snow begin to drift down, vanishing the instant they touch the warm ground. The air smells faintly of ozone and wet stone. You take one last look at the quiet hum of machines, each one faithfully translating the silence of the deep into numbers and noise. The observatory might not prevent the next eruption, but it gives us something almost as precious. The illusion that we're listening closely enough to matter. You step back onto the path, leaving behind the blinking lights and soft static. The volcano continues its long exhale, patient as ever, and you walk along with it, sharing the same invisible rhythm. The path from the observatory bends through a patch of forest that smells faintly of pine resin and sulphur, an unlikely duet of calm and corrosion. You follow it downhill, the soft crunch of needles beneath your boots blending with the sighs of distant vents. Every now and then the ground feels hollow, a subtle drumbeat beneath your steps, as if some giant below were tapping back. At the base of the hill you find what you didn't expect. Carvings, old ones, etched into a wall of volcanic tuff near the riverbank. Spirals, lines, shapes that look like hands, and one that unmistakably resembles a plume of smoke curling from a mountain. The rock itself has been polished smooth by centuries of wind and rain, but the figures remain stubborn and clear. You run your fingertips along them, tracing someone else's memory. This was a warning, you think, or maybe a story. Historians still argue whether ancient markings like these were literal records of eruptions or symbolic tales of renewal. Some say the ancestors of the Crow or Shoshone carved these images after witnessing the Earth's fury. Others claim the shapes are metaphors, fire as life, ash as rebirth. Either way, they speak the same truth. The land moves, and we must move with it. Nearby, a ranger station displays weathered photographs from the 19th century. Early explorers standing awkwardly beside geysers, their faces half awe, half fear. Their journals describe the basin as the Devil's Garden. Back then, the myth of the West was still being written, and Yellowstone was its fever dream. Some early settlers believed the steam vents were gateways to hell. Others thought they were proof of divine punishment, God's stovetop left on. You chuckle softly at the irony. Now we call it a national treasure. Same boiling earth, different branding. A gust of wind rattles through the trees and you swear the carvings seem to shift in the shadows. You step back, squinting, realizing how easily the human brain makes meaning from chaos. The same instinct that sees faces in clouds is the one that turned volcanoes into gods. We've always needed stories to explain the tremors underfoot. Across the river, the cliffs rise in jagged layers of pumice and ash. Each layer is a page, a different eruption sealed in stone. The lighter bands mark quieter centuries, the dark ones, the moments when the sky itself fell. You imagine early humans standing here after one of those cataclysms, ash in their hair, silence pressing on their ears, trying to explain what they'd seen. Maybe the carvings are their attempt to make sense of something beyond comprehension. The mountain spoke, and this was how they answered. You crouch beside the river, the water cloudy with sediment, and scoop a handful into your palm. It's warm, not steaming, just warmer than it should be. The current curls around your wrist like breath. You wonder what minerals are hidden in it. Iron, silica, memory. A few feet away, a placard offers a modern translation of local legends. One tale tells of a giant sleeping beneath the land whose breath warms the soil. When people angered him, he exhaled too deeply, covering the sky in smoke. But when they sang to him, he slept peacefully. You smile. It's not far from the truth. Magma chambers, gas pressure, eruptions all depend on balance. Maybe the ancients didn't have the wrong idea at all. They just told it in poetry instead of physics. You follow the trail upriver, where another carving catches your eye. A strange circular symbol divided into 4 quadrants. Some interpret it as a calendar, others as a map of the caldera itself. The edges are dotted with tiny triangles, mountains perhaps, or warning signs. You tilt your head, trying to decode it. Maybe it's not a warning, but an invitation. Remember where you stand. Remember who sleeps below. In the distance, thunder rolls, not from the sky, but the ground. A small tremor, gentle but distinct. You steady yourself against a tree, feeling the vibration run through bark and bone alike. The forest seems to hold its breath. Then slowly the birds resume their song. You can almost hear the old stories breathing again. There's a modern mythology too, one spun not by shamans but by bloggers and conspiracy theorists. You've seen the forums, the ones predicting the big one, complete with countdowns and grainy thermal maps pulled from public data. Some claim the government's hiding evidence of magma rising. Others believe the eruption will cleanse the Earth, a fiery reset for civilization. It's the same old instinct, just dressed in Wi-Fi and paranoia. You laugh softly to yourself. Humanity has always needed its prophecies. We used to carve them in stone, now we upload them in 4K. Still, there's something fascinating about that continuity. how each generation writes its own myth around the same mountain. Ancient people feared a god's wrath. Modern ones fear algorithms that might predict it. In the end, both are just ways of coping with the same truth. We live on borrowed calm. You rest your hand on the tough wall one last time. It's warm from the sun but cool underneath, as if storing both fire and shadow. For a moment, you think of how many others have touched this same rock, telling it their own fears, their own versions of the story. Maybe the land keeps them all. Every word, every prayer, every whisper. A hawk circles overhead, casting a flicker of shadow across the carvings. The wind picks up again, rustling the leaves, carrying with it the faint scent of sulphur and pine. You close your eyes, listening. The ground beneath you hums, steady and low, like a language you almost understand. And somewhere in that hum, between myth and measurement, you realize something simple but profound. Science and story aren't opposites. They're translations of the same wonder. One counts tremors, the other gives them meaning. You open your eyes again. The carvings stare back, patient as always, waiting for the next story to begin. The air sharpens as you climb out of the forest and onto an exposed plateau where the view unrolls like a painting that's a little too honest. The basin stretches miles across, ringed by dark ridges that form the caldera's rim, a scar so vast it hides in plain sight. You pause, catching your breath, and the silence feels heavier here, as though even the wind knows better than to speak too loudly. You imagine for a reckless moment what it would look like if that silence broke, if ash met sky again. The mental image hits with cinematic precision, the first plume rising like a column of ghostly smoke, then swelling, spreading, thickening until the sky is gone. Ash darkens the sun, turning noon into twilight. Lightning flashes inside the column, volcanic lightning, the Earth's static rage. The air smells of sulphur and burning pine. The ground trembles as pyroclastic flows pour outward, rivers of pulverized rock moving faster than sound. The basin becomes an oven, the mountains crumble into flame, and the world as you know it ends in color. It's too easy to picture, too vivid. You blink, and the fantasy fades. The sky returns, blue and harmless, the wind cool on your face. Still, the thought lingers, like a heat mirage behind your eyelids. You sit on a boulder to steady yourself. The rock is warm, everything here seems to remember fire. You pull a notebook from your pack, its pages already creased and smudged, and sketch the horizon line, labeling peaks like a cartographer of potential doom. Beneath the drawing you write in neat, sleepy letters, "When ash meets sky, the planet forgets what blue is." It's dramatic, sure, but not wrong. Historians still argue whether the last Yellowstone eruption really dimmed the sun for years or merely months. Some ice cores suggest global cooling that lasted decades, others show a quicker rebound. What everyone agrees on is this: the next time it happens, civilization will notice. Ash plumes can travel thousands of miles. Even a modest eruption like Pinatubo in 1991 dropped global temperatures by 0.5 degree Celsius. That blast, small compared to Yellowstone's potential, turned sunsets blood red and grounded flights for months. Imagine 10,000 times that scale. Planes would vanish from skies not from damage, but because there'd be nowhere safe to land. Engines choke on ash, satellites blink out in static. The global air routes, our veins of commerce, collapse in hours. And then the real trouble begins. You can see it so clearly. Fields buried in grey dust, crops suffocating under it, rivers clogged and toxic, cities choking on a fine rain of glass particles, masks on every face, not from contagion, but from the Earth's breath. Even power grids fail. The ash too conductive, shorting lines, silencing lights. The planet goes quiet in a way modern humans have never experienced. You take a long, deliberate breath, grounding yourself back in the present. The birds are still singing, the wind is still moving through the pines, the apocalypse hasn't RSVP'd yet. A ranger once told you that the thing people misunderstand most about supervolcanoes is the pace. Everyone expects explosions, she said, but most of what happens is slow. The ash clouds drift for weeks. The temperature drop takes months. The famine comes later, like an afterthought. She'd smiled, half wry. The end of the world takes its time. You glance at the horizon again where faint clouds gather. Harmless, ordinary, Yet for a moment, they resemble ash columns. Your mind can't help seeing patterns, a kind of nervous poetry. Humans are like that. We turn dread into art. Maybe that's why every culture has painted its own end of days. Floods, fire, famine, different elements, same conclusion. There's a fringe debate you recall, whispered among climatologists, about whether humanity would survive a supervolcanic winter at all. Some models suggest a rebound after a few hard years. Others predict a centuries-long cooling that would undo civilization's progress. Historians still argue whether the Toba eruption in Indonesia 74,000 years ago nearly wiped out early humans. DNA evidence hints at a population bottleneck, our ancestors reduced to mere thousands, clinging to survival under a dimmed sky. If it happened once, it could happen again. You close your notebook, enough hypotheticals, you're supposed to be relaxing, though relaxing while sitting atop a loaded magma chamber does feel like a very 21st century hobby. You chuckle softly, the sound small against the expanse. Nice day for the apocalypse, you mutter, and your voice vanishes into the wind. At your feet, the soil is dusted with fine volcanic sand. You pick up a handful, letting it trickle through your fingers. It glitters faintly in the sunlight, tiny shards of glass, remnants of ancient eruptions long cooled. Each grain a time capsule. You wonder how many future hands will hold the ash you'll one day become. Somewhere down in the valley, a geyser erupts, the sound echoing like applause. The earth, it seems, still enjoys its own theatrics. You stand, brushing grit from your palms, and turn slowly, taking in the enormity of the caldera. It's too vast to fit in your mind, too patient to fear. There's something almost comforting about its indifference. The volcano doesn't hate, doesn't plan, it just exists waiting for its next expression of physics. You remember a line from a documentary you watched years ago. The next super eruption will be the loudest sound humanity has ever not heard. The phrasing stuck with you. The idea that we might not survive to hear it, that silence could swallow even the echo. You shiver, though not from the cold. Then again, maybe the eruption never comes. Maybe the volcano cools, solidifies, becomes nothing more than a monument to potential energy. Scientists still argue whether the magma beneath Yellowstone is even molten enough to blow. Maybe the monster has already gone to sleep for good, and all our doomsday fantasies are just projections of our own restless minds. You like that possibility. It makes the air feel lighter. You exhale slowly and whisper, just to hear it out loud. Not today. The sky stays blue, the ground stays still. Somewhere far below, magma shifts lazily, unconcerned with your declaration. For now, the ash stays where it belongs, deep in the Earth's memory, waiting for a different sky to remember it. You stand on the plateau until the wind steals the chill from your skin and the sound of the geysers below begins to blend with your heartbeat. From here, it's impossible not to think globally. One violent inhale from this sleeping crater, and the shock would travel farther than sight, farther even than reason. That thought turns into a quiet curiosity. What happens to the rest of the world when a single point on a map decides to change shape? You walk slowly toward the overlook, boots crunching in volcanic gravel. Beneath you, the crust creaks in frequencies no ear can hear. Every movement here, no matter how small, is connected by stone to everything else. Faults along the Rockies, stress lines creeping toward the coast, mid-ocean ridges that hum like tuning forks. When Yellowstone stirs, the entire planet listens. Economists once ran a simulation called Ashfall 2030. You remember reading about it, how a team of disaster modelers imagined an eruption 10 times larger than Mount St. Helens. Planes grounded within hours, solar panels blanked by ash, shipping ports clogged as grey snow settled over container yards. Within days, food prices spiked, currencies wobbled. The model showed that a supervolcano wouldn't just darken skies, it would short-circuit the global market. Historians still argue whether this kind of forecasting is practical science or just the modern version of prophecy. After all, predicting panic is easier than predicting lava. Still, the exercise revealed something unnerving. Our world economy is as fragile as the crust you're standing on. You picture it like dominoes on a table. The first falls here, in Wyoming, quiet, local, fiery. The next lands in Chicago's commodity markets, then London's stock exchange, then the rice paddies of Southeast Asia, where sunlight is currency and ash is debt. One tilt of the Earth's pressure, and grocery lists on every continent rewrite themselves. A puff of steam bursts from a fissure nearby, startling you back to the present. The smell of sulfur hits, sharp and immediate, grounding you in the moment's physical truth. The global what-ifs fade to the tangible hiss of chemistry. You crouch to watch droplets bead on the black rock. Each bubble that bursts is a micro-eruption, a harmless echo of the forces you've been imagining. You remember how even small volcanoes have rewritten history. When Iceland's Lakey fissure erupted in 1783, the sulfur haze drifted over Europe for months, killing crops and dimming sunlight. Some historians claim its famine helped ignite the French Revolution. The earth sneezed, politics coughed. And Tambora, again that grim celebrity of 1815. Its ash circled the globe, giving Europe the year without a summer. Crops failed, horses died, and desperate inventors built the first bicycles because carriages needed feed they couldn't afford. Out of hunger came invention. Out of darkness, a new way to move. The chain reaction of necessity. You can't help but wonder what creativity a Yellowstone eruption might spark. What new forms of resilience or madness? Would we migrate underground, float cities on the seas, or would we, true to form, argue online until the Wi-Fi gave out? You grin despite yourself. The absurd humour keeps the scale from crushing you. The trail curves toward a small outcropping where another interpretive sign waits, politely laminated against weather. It explains that fine volcanic ash can circle the globe within weeks, suspended in the upper atmosphere. Global climate effects may persist for years, it says, in the sort of calm font that feels deeply inappropriate for describing planetary winter. You trace the edges of the sign with your fingertip. The metal is cool, steady, indifferent. Somewhere below, magma rolls like red tide. Above, jet contrails cross the sky, white scars of human ambition. You watch one fade, thinking how easily a plume of ash could replace it, turning travel into memory. A fringe proposal you once read about resurfaces in your mind. A volcanic global insurance fund, an economic safety net for nations affected by super eruptions. The idea never caught on. Politicians laughed it off, too speculative, too unlikely. Yet here you are, standing over the possibility itself. You imagine the debate replayed in some future ash-choked parliament. We should have listened. You walk on, and the landscape begins to shift again. The ground dips, and suddenly you're surrounded by skeletal trees, their trunks bleached and smooth. This was once a forest drowned by mineral springs. Over centuries, silica replaced the wood cell by cell, turning life into stone. It's hauntingly beautiful, a fossilized reminder that transformation is the Earth's favorite pastime. You reach out to touch one trunk. The surface is cool, slick like glass. It feels eternal. For a moment, you think of human infrastructure, skyscrapers, bridges, satellites, all temporary architecture built on the assumption of permanence. Yet even this stone tree was once alive, and even it will crumble someday. The planet always reclaims its pieces. The wind picks up, carrying with it the faraway rumble of a waterfall. You follow the sound until the land opens into a wide gorge where the Yellowstone River cuts through layers of gold and red rock. From this height, the water looks like molten metal, liquid sunlight carving its way through time. You lean on the railing, watching spray rise in gentle ghosts. It's almost poetic the way destruction and creation coexist here. The river wearing down what the volcano built up. One sculpts, the other erases, and together they make beauty. Historians still argue whether civilizations ever truly recover from global cataclysms. Some say resilience is our defining trait. Others, that every recovery rewrites humanity into something unrecognizable. You suspect both are true. Survival is just transformation with paperwork. The clouds gather a little thicker now, grey with afternoon moisture. You imagine ash instead of rain, falling softly, quietly. The difference is only in temperature and consequence. A shiver runs through you, not from fear, but from the strange intimacy of realizing how connected everything is. Magma, money, memory. A clap of thunder breaks your thought. The real kind from the sky this time. The storm rolls in, modest, local, merciful. You smile, grateful that today's drama belongs only to weather. You pull up your hood and keep walking as the first drops fall. Warm rain, smelling faintly of minerals. The land around you drinks it in, steam rising where water meets heat. For a moment, You can't tell which direction the clouds are moving, the sky raining down or the earth exhaling up. Either way, it feels like balance. The storm doesn't last long, just a passing mood from the sky, a rinse to cool the land's fever. When it clears, the air feels rinsed too, crisp, almost metallic, each breath tasting faintly of stone dust. You stand in the wet silence and realize you can hear the volcano breathing again. It's subtle, like the slow stretch of wood in a cooling house, a creak here, a sigh there. This is the science of waiting. You wander back toward a trailhead where the park's monitoring station hums faintly, its solar panels glistening with raindrops. From inside, you can hear the soft static of radio chatter, scientists exchanging updates, cataloguing quakes, the murmurs of patients turned profession. Their lives revolve around listening. Waiting, it turns out, is both the hardest and most scientific thing humans do here. Inside the visitor center, a digital map pulses with color-coded dots marking recent earthquakes. Some are barely perceptible, magnitude 1 or less, so small that they only nudge the confidence of instruments, not people. Still, they matter. Each dot is data, another syllable in the volcano's long, lazy sentence. A researcher greets you, smiling over her coffee mug. "You picked a quiet day," she says. "Nothing dramatic, just the usual murmurs." Her tone is cheerful, but there's something weary behind it. You sense she's said the same line hundreds of times, and part of her hopes she never has to change the script. Historians still argue whether our fascination with Yellowstone's calm is rooted in fear or boredom. We want the drama of fire but the safety of silence. The volcano's long dormancy taunts both instincts, proof that nature doesn't care about our timelines. You glance at the seismograph behind her desk. The line quivers with minute oscillations, a slow pulse. She notices your stare and chuckles. "That's the heartbeat," she says. "It's always there." Sometimes it races a little, sometimes it rests. We just make sure it doesn't flatline or spike. The metaphor feels oddly humanizing. You imagine the caldera sprawled below, dreaming, each tremor a shift in its sleep. The scientist turns back to her work, and you drift outside again, drawn by the view of steam rising from a distant vent. Waiting, you realize, has its own kind of beauty. The land itself is patient, carved by processes that ignore urgency. You remember reading about the last 3 major eruptions, 2.1 million, 1.3 million, and 640,000 years ago. The intervals aren't regular. There's no clock to set. Some call it a pattern, others coincidence. Historians still argue whether nature even keeps time in the way we do. You find a bench near the vent and sit, watching steam twist into pale ribbons. It reminds you of incense in an empty cathedral, ritual without audience. You imagine the magma below, cooling, thickening, changing. Scientists say that most of the magma here isn't even fully molten, more like a slush, a crystalline soup. Only about 10% is true liquid fire, enough to power the system, but not enough to blow, at least not yet. The idea comforts you. Mostly solid sounds stable enough. Then again, so does mostly harmless. A fringe hypothesis once suggested that Yellowstone's long dormancy might mean it's transitioning from explosive to effusive behavior, from cataclysmic eruptions to smaller, more frequent lava flows. That's the optimistic camp, the glass-half-cooled interpretation. Other researchers point out that such transitions have happened before, but rarely without a final, dramatic farewell eruption first. The Earth loves symmetry, and endings often rhyme with beginnings. The vent beside you sighs, interrupting your thoughts. Hot vapor curls over your knees, making your jeans damp. You close your eyes and let the sound wash over you. The hiss is steady, almost like the tide. Inhale, exhale. Waiting, you realize, isn't passive, it's an act of faith. The scientists waiting in their observatories, the bison grazing without concern, even the microbes boiling quietly in their pools, all of them participate in the same long patience. Maybe that's what life is, waiting, adapting, refusing to rush the inevitable. You think of how human waiting feels by comparison, antsy, caffeinated, full of deadlines. We measure everything in months, years, fiscal quarters. The volcano measures in eons. The mismatch makes us nervous. We call it unpredictability, but maybe it's just a different tempo. You stand, stretch, and wander toward the overlook again. The storm clouds have thinned into gauzy streaks, backlit by the lowering sun. Everything glows, the hills, the steam, even the puddles at your feet reflecting a perfect molten sky. You pull a small recorder from your pocket, one of those handheld models tourists use to capture ambience. You click it on and set it near the vent. The soft hiss fills your headphones, a lullaby of heat. You'll play it back later when you're home, just to remind yourself what patience sounds like. As the recorder hums, you scribble in your notebook, "Science is just waiting," translated into numbers. "Faith is waiting," translated into breath. A cool gust passes through, fluttering the page. You steady it with one hand, smiling. Somewhere, a distant geyser erupts with a hollow whoomp, and you think of all the scientists who will log that event, file it neatly, and return to waiting. There's humour in it too, if you look closely. One of them once joked on a live stream, "Our job is basically watching water boil and hoping it doesn't decide to boil the sky." You laughed then, and you laugh now. Humour, after all, is another form of patience, the ability to endure absurdity with grace. The light begins to fade. Shadows stretch across the caldera, long and soft. The vents release more steam as evening cools the ground, each plume glowing gold in the last light. You realise you've been sitting in silence for nearly an hour, yet it doesn't feel like waiting anymore. It feels like participating, like you're part of the same slow rhythm, the same unhurried dialogue between heat and stone. The ground hums once, a low vibration through your heels, then settles. You smile, whispering to no one in particular. "Still talking, huh?" No reply, just the sound of the earth turning over in its sleep. You wake in the small hours, half dreaming, half listening. The night around you is silent except for the soft hum of wind through the trees and the slow drip of condensation from your tent flap. It's the kind of silence that feels alive, the kind that makes you hyper-aware of your own pulse. The air smells faintly metallic again, that ever-present note of minerals and heat. For a second, you can't tell whether it's your imagination or if the ground is really vibrating. You unzip the tent and crawl out, boots crunching on damp soil. The moon hangs low over the basin, a pale coin shining through thin ribbons of steam. You can see the geysers in the distance, glowing faintly in the moonlight like quiet engines. Everything feels paused, every insect, every breeze. The volcano's insomnia mirrors your own. Pressure points, you think. That's what the scientists call them. The places where magma, gas, and water wrestle for control. Down there, under all that rock, water seeps into fissures, gets trapped, and flashes instantly to steam. The pressure multiplies until it finds escape. Sometimes it's a geyser, sometimes a quake, and sometimes, on the grandest scale imaginable, it's an eruption. You crouch, resting a hand against the ground. It's warm, even in the night chill. Somewhere far below, the duel continues. Magma pushing upward, water forcing down. The crust between them acts like a lid, creaking, flexing, thinning. One day it may fail. A flash of memory surfaces from a lecture you once watched online. A volcanologist describing the St. Helens explosion of 1980. "Pressure always wins," he said, his voice low and certain. "The only question is when the lid gives out." He'd compared magma to champagne and rock to the cork, trapped gases expanding until physics has its say. The imagery stuck with you, maybe because it was equal parts terrifying and festive. Historians still argue whether supervolcanoes like Yellowstone erupt because of sudden influxes of magma, or because trapped water flashes to steam, fracturing the crust from above. Either way, the ending's the same. Pressure seeking equilibrium. Nature, after all, doesn't negotiate, it just balances. You walk toward the ridge where the Earth's warmth gathers in the cool night air. The steam here is thicker, almost opaque. It curls around you, clinging to your skin, dampening your eyelashes. In it, you can taste salt and sulfur, a sharp reminder that this beauty is chemical, volatile. Every element in your body, iron, calcium, carbon, was once forged in heat like this, just higher and farther away, in the belly of stars. Maybe that's why you feel oddly at home here. You sit on a smooth boulder and look up. The stars burn bright tonight, unbothered by clouds. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a slow river of light. You imagine the view during an eruption, the glow from below competing with the heavens above. The ancients must have thought it was the sky collapsing, heaven and hell trading places. You hear a soft plunk nearby, like something dropping into water. A small thermal pool bubbles lazily, its surface glimmering with starlight. the reflection trembles, a perfect mirror of the cosmos distorted by heat. You smile, thinking how the universe and the volcano share the same temperament, both born from pressure, both prone to bursts of creation. You take out your field notebook again, hands shaking slightly from the chill, and write in big, looping letters. Pressure isn't violence, it's just potential with bad manners. A small joke, but it feels true. You close your eyes and listen. Beneath the usual whispers of wind and steam, you think you hear something deeper, a rolling, almost melodic hum. Maybe it's the river echoing through the canyon, or maybe it's magma shifting far below, a low-frequency lullaby of molten rock. Scientists record these sounds sometimes, calling them harmonic tremors. They're like the Earth's long, sustained notes, vibrations that hint at movement within. There's a fringe theory, half physics, half poetry, that the planet uses these vibrations to self-regulate. Some geophysicists compare it to a pressure valve in a boiler, releasing small amounts of energy through sound before catastrophe strikes. Others dismiss it as coincidence, background noise in an old machine. Still, the idea that the Earth might sing to keep itself from exploding is the kind of science that keeps you awake at night. You shift your weight, feeling the ground pulse faintly beneath you. A single, deep tremor. It's not strong, just enough to make your coffee thermos rattle against the rock. The air holds its breath. Then, silence again. You grin nervously, whispering, "Okay, message received." You stand, stretch, and take a slow walk along the ridge. In the moonlight, the steam drifting up from vents looks like pale banners waving from an invisible battlefield. The duel below continues, magma and water, heat and resistance, both convinced they'll win. A flash of memory drifts in. 2016, when a swarm of earthquakes rattled this area for months. The scientists logged thousands of tremors, none catastrophic, but enough to remind everyone that stillness is only temporary. You remember how headlines screamed, "Supervolcano awakening," while the actual experts sighed and kept recording. Waiting again, always waiting. The hum returns, so low it's almost inside you. You imagine following it downward, layer by layer, until you reach the chamber itself. The vision unfolds in your mind, molten rivers snaking through black stone, pressure pockets glowing like fireflies, mineral veins shimmering in impossible colours. It's terrifying and beautiful and unspeakably alive. You open your eyes again and look at your hands trembling slightly from adrenaline. The ground is calm now, pretending it never stirred. But you know better. You felt the duel, however briefly. You whisper to yourself, "We live on a sigh." It's true, you realise. The distance between quiet and catastrophe is thinner than we think. A few degrees, a few kilopascals, a few heartbeats. The planet's serenity depends on balance, and balance is always temporary. You sit back on the boulder, letting the warmth soak through your jeans. The first hints of dawn paint the eastern sky pale grey. Steam rises higher as the temperature drops. The land exhales, and for now, the pressure holds. You take one last look at the horizon, whispering, "Stay calm, old giant." The Earth doesn't answer, but you like to think it heard you anyway. The dawn comes soft and metallic, the colour of ash diluted in milk. You stand outside the tent, watching the first light creep over the rim of the caldera, and for a brief moment the world looks bleached, washed of every hue except grey and pale gold. You inhale deeply, and the air feels heavier, as if it remembers what it has carried before. You can't help imagining what the morning after might look like, the first sunrise of the ash years. In your mind, it begins quietly. No explosions anymore, just a low twilight that never lifts. The first few days after the eruption would be chaos. Darkness at noon, snow like ash falling across the plains, cities blinking out under weight their roofs weren't built to bear. But after the panic, after the headlines and the brief bright firestorms, there would be this, a muted dawn, grey and stubborn. You picture yourself walking through that version of the world, boots crunching through layers of ash instead of snow. Each step would release a puff of dust that smells faintly of glass and sulphur. The air, cold and thin, would sting your lungs. Breathing would become a measured act, like learning to swim in an atmosphere gone solid. Historians still argue whether such an eruption could trigger true global winter, or just a few bleak years of cooling. Ice core records show that when Mount Somalis erupted in 1257, Temperatures dropped for half a decade, reshaping medieval harvests. That was small compared to Yellowstone's potential. If the big one went, sunlight would dim worldwide. Crops would wither, the monsoon belts would shift. You'd trade summer shirts for winter coats in August. But humans, stubborn creatures that we are, would adapt. They always do. You imagine the world's new rhythm. Mornings spent clearing ash from solar panels, afternoons cultivating mushrooms and root vegetables in underground farms. Entire cities could migrate indoors, burrowing into mountains, reclaiming the old Cold War bunkers built for different kinds of apocalypse. Children would grow up with stories of the bright sky, their eyes unused to colour, and yet, even in that bleakness, you know someone would find beauty. Poets would write about the silver horizon, artists would grind ash into pigment, lovers would whisper, "Remember blue?" The apocalypse you suspect would turn out to be surprisingly aesthetic. You begin walking along the valley floor where thin mist gathers in the early light. The soil here is soft, dark, volcanic, alive with minerals that once drifted from other eruptions. In a strange way, it's fertile. When the ash years ended, this land would bloom again, richer than before. That's the paradox of destruction. It feeds the next creation. A quirky theory surfaces from something you read long ago, that the spread of volcanic ash across continents might have spurred agricultural revolutions in prehistory. Some geologists argue that ancient soils in parts of Africa and Asia became fertile because of distant eruptions, their minerals unlocking the first great farms. If that's true, then maybe every field of wheat is just an echo of catastrophe. You kneel, scooping up a handful of the damp earth, letting it smear across your palms. It smells faintly metallic, like rain on coins. Life, you think, is stubborn. It keeps sprouting through its own burial. You walk on until you reach a small rise overlooking the basin. From here, the steam plumes look gentler, as if they too have grown tired of roaring. The wind moves them like ghosts rehearsing calm. You sit, taking out your notebook again, flipping to a fresh page. You write, "The ash years would not end the world. They'd just give it new weather." You pause, tapping the pen against your knee. The sound echoes faintly, swallowed by distance. Maybe that's what survival really is. Not rebuilding, but learning to move at a different speed. In your mind's eye, you see the first survivors weeks after the eruption, wandering through grey landscapes, faces masked with cloth, eyes watering from the grit. But then, one person kneels to plant something, a small seed saved in a pocket. Another builds a fire. A group clears ash from a rooftop and collects rainwater in barrels. Life doesn't end, it improvises. Historians still argue whether human civilization is more fragile or more resilient than we think. Looking around at the quiet strength of the landscape, you're leaning toward resilient. The earth itself sets the example. It destroys, it rests, it grows back. The sun climbs higher, pale and filtered through lingering mist. The light makes everything shimmer. The wet soil, the steam, the air itself. You imagine, just for a moment, that you're standing in that future world where this grey glow is permanent. It's not horrifying, it's peaceful. There's no traffic, no chatter, no artificial hum, only the slow exhale of the planet and the pulse of your own heart keeping time with it. You pull your jacket tighter, feeling the warmth trapped underneath, and laugh softly. "Guess I'd manage," you whisper. The laugh turns to a cough when the sulphur hits your throat, a reminder that this serenity still has teeth. You stand, brushing dust from your jeans, and start back toward camp. The ground feels stable underfoot but alive, every vibration carrying upward through stone and soil, a reminder that this calm is conditional. The wind shifts, carrying the faint scent of pine smoke from a ranger's camp miles away. It blends with the sulphur in a strangely nostalgic way, like the smell of a campfire after a storm. You stop to listen. Somewhere, a geyser erupts, its roar echoing across the basin. It sounds like applause, or maybe like warning. You whisper, half to the land and half to yourself. "We'd rebuild, wouldn't we?" No one answers, but the silence doesn't feel empty. It feels patient, as if the planet itself is considering the question. When you reach the tent again, you sit cross-legged at the entrance and pour the last of your coffee into the cup. It's cold now, bitter, but it steadies you. You watch the steam curl up, thin and fleeting, disappearing into the larger breath of the valley. You realise that maybe the ash years wouldn't be an ending after all, just another long pause between heartbeats. The next day begins without ceremony, a soft wind, the scent of pine needles wet from night rain, and that ever-present hum rising from the ground. You pack your gear slowly, not because you're ready to leave, but because you aren't. There's a strange gravity to this place, as though the longer you stay, the more you sink into its rhythm. You sling the pack over your shoulder and begin the long walk toward the northern rim, where cliffs expose the oldest layers of the caldera's story. The trail climbs gently at first, then steepens through volcanic scree that crunches under your boots like broken pottery. Every step feels like walking across time. Here, the rock is streaked in reds, yellows and greys, oxidized iron, cooled ash, ancient glass, each hue marking a different eruption. The sun, still low, slants across the surface, turning the landscape into a mosaic of fire frozen in place. You pause at a flat outcrop where the wind whips fiercely and the view opens wide. From up here, the caldera stretches like a wound that has healed badly, the scar tissue glittering in patches of steam. You pull out your notebook again, flipping to a blank page. This section of your journey is about memory, how the Earth remembers what we've forgotten. You recall the work of paleoclimatologists, those quiet detectives who read the planet's diary written not in words but in ice, mud, and dust. Ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica hold microscopic shards of ash from eruptions long gone, including Yellowstone's last outburst. Each layer of ice traps air bubbles, tiny time capsules of ancient atmosphere. By measuring the ratios of gases inside, scientists can trace the fingerprints of disaster, temperature drops, sulfur spikes, sunlight dimming. Historians still argue whether these records tell the full truth. Some claim the evidence exaggerates, others say it understates. But one thing is certain, the planet remembers even when we don't. The past doesn't disappear, it just condenses. You look down at the valley floor and imagine drilling into it, extracting a core of lake sediment, each millimetre a year. Beneath the upper layer of soil you'd find fine ash, dark and glassy, remnants of ancient firestorms. Beneath that, pollen from forests that no longer exist. Beneath that, perhaps traces of an even older world. Swamps, oceans, dinosaurs, a vertical history book with pages made of dirt. A gust of wind scatters a swirl of dust across your boots, breaking the reverie. You zip your jacket tighter and keep walking. A few miles ahead, the trail leads to a shallow basin where a small lake lies still as glass. Its surface reflects the sky perfectly, interrupted only by the occasional bubble rising from unseen vents. The locals call it Mirror Pond. The irony is not lost on you. Here, even reflections are volcanic. You kneel by the edge, dipping your fingers into the water. It's warmer than expected. Beneath the surface, mineral-rich layers have built up like rings of paint. Ochre, turquoise, jade. It's beautiful, yes, but also deceptive. The water is acidic enough to melt flesh. You withdraw your hand quickly, chuckling at your own recklessness. You think about those who came before you, the explorers who called this place cursed, the geologists who mapped it, the indigenous peoples who treated it as sacred ground. All of them saw something true, even if their truths didn't agree. Historians still argue whether early accounts of burning lakes and stone rain were exaggerations or accurate memories of smaller eruptions. Maybe they were both. Maybe myth is just memory speaking another dialect. You settle on a rock and stare into the lake. In its depths, bubbles rise in lazy procession, breaking the surface with quiet pops. They look like thoughts surfacing, old ideas from the deep past rising for air. You wonder what else lies buried below. Evidence of forgotten eruptions, fossils of creatures caught mid-flight, human artifacts swallowed by centuries. You pull a small vial from your pocket, a keepsake jar you brought for collecting soil. Carefully, you scoop a pinch of the lake's sediment, fine, silvery dust that glints in the sun. You roll it between your fingers and it feels like silk, smoother than sand, lighter than ash. The stuff of time, you think. The planet's exfoliation. There's a fringe hypothesis that crosses your mind. The idea that supervolcanoes might have triggered not only extinction events, but also leaps in evolution. Some scientists propose that environmental stress after massive eruptions forced life to adapt rapidly, accelerating the emergence of new species. Others call it speculation dressed in drama. Still, you can't help but like the thought that catastrophe might be nature's way of refreshing the page. You close the vial and pocket it, a tiny keepsake of eternity. The trail winds upward again, leading to a ridge where petrified wood juts from the ground like broken ribs. You run your hand over the surface, stone that used to be tree, carbon replaced by quartz one atom at a time. The transformation feels personal, almost enviable. To endure fire and emerge crystal is a kind of perfection you can't help but admire. As you walk, you remember the phrase from an old lecture: eruptions erase and reveal simultaneously. It's true of geology, and maybe of people too. Every disaster uncovers something, some layer of strength or tenderness we didn't know was there. The wind picks up again, colder now. Clouds drift low, dragging their shadows across the valley. You imagine the view from space, the caldera a faint ring of pale scars, steam blurring its outline. To a satellite it might look serene, dormant. But down here, where you can hear the hiss and taste the sulphur, serenity feels like the pause between chapters. You pull the hood of your jacket up and keep walking. The world around you glows faintly where light hits wet stone. Even in grey, the colours of the past shimmer through. At the ridge's crest, you stop, turning slowly in a full circle. The horizon stretches endless, layered in light and shadow, history and possibility. Somewhere below, magma stirs, a memory still rewriting itself. You whisper, half a prayer and half a realization. The past never stays buried. It just cools slower than we do. The wind carries the words away, scattering them across the basin like new ash. You stay on that ridge longer than you planned, the wind combing through your hair, the sound of it blending with the soft hiss of distant vents. It feels like the world's longest exhale. When you finally start back down, you realize how strange it is that so much of this story, this living, simmering engine beneath your feet, exists in whispers rather than shouts. And yet, when it comes to the human reflex, whispers are all it takes. One rumour, one tremor, one strange photo of steam where there wasn't any before, and the species that invented both fire and Twitter loses its collective composure. You reach a clearing where cell service returns. Instinctively, you pull out your phone. The screen floods with notifications, headlines, pings of digital noise. Yellowstone registers 34 quakes in 24 hours. Experts dismiss online eruption panic. Supervolcano trending again. You chuckle softly. Even up here, miles from any city, you're part of the reflex loop, the feedback system of curiosity and dread. You scroll briefly, reading the same argument play out beneath each article. Some users quoting scientists, others quoting scripture, a few insisting they can feel the energy shifting. It's chaos, but also oddly comforting. Humanity performing its favourite ritual, panic as performance art. Historians still argue whether this impulse is evolutionary or cultural. Maybe both. Fear spreads faster than ash. It's in our DNA, that ancient need to shout fire, even when the smoke is still imagination. During the Roman Empire, news of Mount Vesuvius's eruption spread by word of mouth, exaggerated into myth within weeks. Now, within minutes, the same pattern unfolds through fibre optics and hashtags. The mountain roars, the world retweets. You pocket the phone, suddenly tired of its glow. The forest around you is dim and real and mercifully disconnected. Yet even as you walk, you feel the ghost vibration of another notification. Maybe it's just your pulse. You remember a fringe sociological paper you read once, a study comparing ancient prophecy scrolls with modern clickbait titles. The author's argument was simple. The apocalypse is the only headline that never goes out of style. The medium changes, papyrus, printing press, push alert, but the reflex stays the same. When faced with mystery, we imagine endings. A flash of humour breaks through. You picture a Bronze Age priest and a 21st century influencer sitting side by side, both shouting into their respective voids, "Repent, the mountain is angry," versus "Top 10 signs Yellowstone is about to explode. Number 5 will shock you." Different fonts, same tremor in the voice. As you descend the slope, the trees grow denser, muffling the sound of the wind. Here, the forest feels like a cathedral. Shafts of sunlight spear through the branches, catching in the drifting steam that snakes between trunks. Every few steps, the smell of pine gives way to a hint of sulphur, sweet and rotten, ancient and alive. You think about what fear does to people. During small earthquake swarms in recent years, locals reported tourists speeding out of the park in caravans, their car roofs piled with gear, convinced the eruption had begun. Hotels emptied overnight, gas stations sold out of fuel. The next morning, scientists held press conferences, explaining it was all normal, magma burping, nothing more. Still, those who fled never quite returned to calm. You find a log to sit on, its surface smooth from rain and time. You rest your elbows on your knees and stare at the earth. Humans are funny, you think. We crave certainty from a planet that's never offered it. A quote surfaces from the back of your mind. Mark Twain, maybe. A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its boots. You smirk. The truth about Yellowstone doesn't even wear boots. It crawls carefully under microscopes and data models, while fear sprints in viral sneakers. The quiet around you grows deeper. Somewhere, a branch snaps. You glance up in time to see a fox slink across the path, its coat glowing copper in the light. It stops, looks at you with unreadable eyes, then disappears into the steam. You envy its indifference. The fox doesn't panic over magma or markets or mortality. It simply moves, unbothered by prophecy. You breathe out a long sigh and realize that's what the volcano does too. Every hiss, every puff of steam is just an exhalation. Pressure leaving quietly before it turns violent. Maybe the mountain's trying to teach us something, that release, not repression, prevents explosion. Historians still argue whether ancient rituals, chanting, drumming, sacrificing, were primitive attempts to calm volcanoes, or simply ways to calm themselves. Either way, they worked for a while. Maybe modern humanity's endless news cycles are the same instinct, digital sacrifices to make the fear feel manageable. You decide to indulge your own ritual. Pulling your notebook from your jacket, you write a single sentence. If the world ends, at least we warned each other thoroughly. Then you close it, smiling. You keep walking until the trees thin again and the valley opens, wide and silver under the afternoon sun. The air vibrates faintly with heat. The geysers hiss in the distance like a crowd whispering secrets. You imagine the collective consciousness of the planet tuned into those whispers, each person interpreting them differently. Scientists as data, mystics as omens, doomers as countdowns. And then there are people like you, standing somewhere in the middle, content to just listen. A distant rumble echoes through the air, not seismic, just thunder again, lazy and harmless. You laugh softly. The reflex kicks in for a second anyway, that half second of what if, before reason steadies you. Fear may be ancient, but awareness is newer, sharper. You crouch, scoop up a handful of dust and let it drift through your fingers. Not today, you say again, the words carried off by the wind, then quieter. But thank you for the reminder. Because that's the gift in the reflex, isn't it? The reminder that life itself is temporary and magnificent, balanced on the edge of pressure and calm. The wind picks up, scattering the last of the dust, and somewhere far below, the volcano sighs again, just enough to keep the story going. The next stretch of trail follows an old service road that winds toward a fence clearing, a patch of experimental ground the rangers jokingly call Area 51.5. A sign bolted to the chain-link fence reads Geothermal Research Zone, authorized personnel only, but the lock on the gate hangs open, as if the land itself doesn't believe in bureaucracy. You hesitate, glance around, and then, curiosity winning as usual, slip inside. The clearing hums with quiet machinery. Cables run between squat metal boxes half buried in gravel. A small trailer sits at the edge, its windows tinted against glare. On the door, a paper notice flaps in the breeze. Testing in progress. Do not touch equipment. Naturally, you do not touch it, but you can't help peering closer. Inside one of the boxes, a glass tube glows faintly red. Heat monitoring sensors, probably. You know this because you once fell down a late-night research rabbit hole, reading about all the ways humans have tried and failed to engineer control over volcanoes. It's our second most audacious idea, right after immortality. The theories range from the practical to the ridiculous. Drill relief wells to vent the magma, some say. Pump in water to cool the chamber. Seed the upper atmosphere with aerosols to offset the warming that might follow. One paper even proposed detonating small nuclear devices around the caldera's rim to bleed pressure safely. You shake your head. remembering how every scientist interviewed afterward looked directly into the camera and said, "Please, let's not." Historians still argue whether such ambitions count as innovation or hubris. You suspect they're both sides of the same human coin, our desperate need to negotiate with forces that don't take meetings. You wander around the site reading the faded stickers on the equipment: USGS Thermal Flux Array 7, Seismic Drill Hole 3A, Experimental Well Monitoring. The air here smells stronger, richer with sulfur. Steam seeps through cracks in the soil like the Earth's version of smoke signals. Somewhere underfoot, a narrow borehole reaches thousands of feet down. They drilled it to study temperature gradients, but also, unofficially, to test an idea. Could tapping geothermal heat here power entire cities? The results were promising, until one test caused a localized swarm of quakes that sent the investors scurrying back to safer energy sources. You crouch beside one of the vents, listening to it hiss. The warmth is comforting, but the message is clear. This system doesn't like to be poked. A thin voice behind you breaks the quiet. "You're not supposed to be in here." You turn. A man in a hard hat and parka stands by the trailer, coffee cup in one hand, clipboard in the other. His tone is firm but not angry. You raise both palms in apology. "Just curious." He sighs, walks closer and looks you over. "Everyone's curious," he says. "That's how we get into trouble." Then softer. "Want to see something cool before I escort you out?" You nod eagerly. He leads you to the trailer and gestures toward a small monitor glowing in the dim interior. On the screen, a digital map shows color-coded zones of heat beneath the caldera. "We've been tracking this region for years," he explains, "that bright spot. It's where the temperature's risen about 15 degrees in the last decade. Not alarming yet, but notable. The pixels pulse slowly, hypnotically, like embers under ice." He takes a sip of coffee. "You'd be amazed how many emails I get suggesting ways to solve this place. One guy wrote that we should build a massive copper plug and just cap it." He chuckles. "Sure, like corking the planet." You grin. At least he's optimistic. "Optimistic," he repeats, shaking his head. "That's one word for it." He tells you a story then, about an experimental drilling project in Iceland in 2009, where a bore accidentally struck a magma pocket. The equipment melted instantly, but the scientists learned more in those few seconds than in years of theory. They proved that controlled contact with magma might be possible one day, though, as the engineer puts it, possible and wise are different measurements. You listen, fascinated, as he scrolls through graphs of pressure and temperature readings. The numbers flicker like heartbeat monitors for the Earth itself. "She's stable," he says finally, patting the console, resting, not restless. Outside again, the wind cools the sweat on your neck. You glance back at the trailer, its instruments still blinking steadily. Human ambition looks small here, tiny sparks against an ancient system. You recall a fringe concept called planetary stewardship, an idea proposed by eco-engineers who believe humanity should one day regulate Earth's geological and climatic systems consciously, like organs in a body, terraforming, but inward. Most scientists dismissed it as science fiction dressed in policy language. Still, the thought lingers. Maybe one day we'll learn to coexist with volcanoes not by conquering them, but by harmonizing with their cycles. You find a boulder to sit on and pull your notebook from your pack. The paper smells faintly of sulfur now, a permanent souvenir. You write. "We call it engineering when we tinker with the planet. The planet calls it feedback. A gust of wind nearly snatches the page from your hand. You laugh, tucking it back inside the cover. Far below, a geyser erupts, scattering mist into sunlight. The timing feels poetic, like punctuation. You imagine the Earth rolling its eyes at your human earnestness. Historians still argue whether our age, the Anthropocene as we like to name it, will end with mastery or humility. Standing here, you're betting on the latter. The ground beneath you is warm, breathing, unbothered by your conclusions. The engineer waves from the fence as you leave. "Stay on the marked trails," he calls. You wave back, promising nothing. The path winds through a field of wildflowers improbably blooming near the steam vents. Yellow, white, violet, all thriving on soil that could melt stone. Life, as always, is the best engineer of all. As the wind carries the hiss of the vents behind you, you whisper a quiet thanks to the scientist, to the volcano, to the madness of human curiosity. We'll keep trying to fix the unfixable, you think. Maybe that's not arrogance. Maybe it's love. The path eventually opens into a wide meadow, and suddenly you're not alone. Lines of cars fill the parking lot by the boardwalk, tourists spilling out in windbreakers and wide-brimmed hats, selfie sticks glinting like antennas. The sulphur tang that you've come to accept as background scent hits a few newcomers full in the face. Grimaces, laughter, phones already out. The world's largest pressure cooker has an excellent gift shop. This is the strange theatre of tourism at the edge. You join the slow-moving crowd shuffling toward Old Faithful, the geyser that made Yellowstone famous not because it's the biggest or hottest, but because it's punctual. Every 90 minutes, give or take, it rises on cue, the planet's one reliable appointment. People gather as if at a concert, cameras armed and ready. You weave among them, listening to the languages, German, Mandarin, French, English, all the same breath waiting for steam. The ground beneath the viewing area thrums faintly, a vibration that most people don't even register. You can feel it though, the way an animal might feel thunder before sound. Somewhere beneath this polite wooden deck, the earth is working its hydraulics. Historians still argue whether tourism here is an act of reverence or denial. You watch a father lift his daughter onto his shoulders so she can see better, and you think maybe it's both. Reverence for beauty, denial of danger. Humans have always sought comfort near cliffs. A ranger with a microphone announces that the geyser is due in about 3 minutes. The crowd hushes in anticipation. Phones rise like a synchronized salute, and then it begins. A low gurgle, a widening pool, and suddenly a white column bursts skyward, roaring like applause from the deep. Steam billows outward, soaking the air. The crowd gasps, cheers, records. For 90 seconds, everyone forgets to be afraid. The spray catches the sunlight, forming a brief rainbow. Someone claps. Someone else mutters, "Worth the drive?" You just stand there, half-drenched, grinning like a fool. The warmth of the mist feels oddly intimate, as if the volcano itself just winked. When it's over, the crowd scatters. Within minutes, the boardwalk empties, the chatter fading toward the parking lot. You linger, watching the steam drift lazily back into silence. It's funny how quickly awe turns to errands. A few feet away, a small plaque notes that Old Faithful's interval has lengthened over the last century. Proof that the plumbing system below is evolving. Faithful, it turns out, is relative. The geyser may one day stop altogether, its channel sealed by minerals or shifted by quake. You imagine future tourists arriving to find only a quiet puddle, reading the sign, shrugging, and moving on. You wander toward the gift shop out of curiosity. Inside, shelves gleam with polished obsidian trinkets, jars of ash labelled authentic supervolcano dust, and mugs emblazoned with slogans like, "I survived Yellowstone, so far." The irony steams as thick as the hot springs outside. You pick up a magnet shaped like an eruption cloud, laugh quietly, and put it back. At the counter, a teenager rings up postcards, unfazed by the steady tremors beneath his workplace. You ask him if he ever worries about the volcano. He shrugs. "If it blows, I won't have to do homework," he says. You can't argue with that logic. Outside again, the sun is lowering, painting the steam gold. A bison ambles across the road, ignoring the honks of impatient drivers. You watch it for a while, its massive head swinging lazily. The creature looks prehistoric, as if it remembers the last eruption firsthand. A tourist beside you raises a camera. "He doesn't even care," she says, awed. You smile. He's on home turf. You follow the boardwalk deeper into the geyser basin, away from the noise. The crowd's thin. Pools of impossible colour, cobalt orange lime, spread out beside the path, each one a self-contained world of microbes and heat. The air is thick with steam that smells like coins and wet stone. You lean over the railing and stare into a pool so blue it looks unreal. The depth draws you in, hypnotic, like an eye that never blinks. It's beautiful, yes, but also unsettling. You remember reading that several visitors over the years have ignored warnings and stepped off these paths, lured by beauty or bravado, and fallen through thin crust into boiling water. The rangers call them hot pot incidents, a term so clinical it hides the horror. Even in paradise, there are no safety rails strong enough for human impulse. You whisper a quiet prayer to curiosity and caution both. A quirky historical tidbit surfaces as you walk. In the early 1900s, before park regulations, tourists used to toss laundry into hot springs, timing how long socks took to boil clean. Some even cooked eggs in geysers, the Earth's wrath repurposed as convenience. You grin. Humans, forever domesticating apocalypse. Historians still argue whether this tendency to turn danger into amusement is resilience or folly. Watching a couple pose for selfies beside a vent belching steam that could melt a shoe, you decide it's both. Survival, after all, often starts as denial. You wander to a quiet bench overlooking the basin. The light softens, the air hums. From here, the geysers look like breathing, rising plumes that fade, then rise again elsewhere, as if the ground itself is shifting its shoulders. The rhythm is soothing, almost meditative. You take out your notebook, but this time you don't write, you just listen. A child laughs somewhere behind you, the sound echoing like a songbird through steam. The volcano exhales, the crowd forgets its mortality, and for a fleeting evening everything feels perfectly, absurdly normal. You close your eyes and smile. Maybe this is why people come, to stand at the edge of the end and find joy anyway. To sip soda beside a supervolcano and call it vacation. To remind themselves that beauty and danger share the same coordinates. As night falls, the boardwalk lights flicker on, tiny stars guiding the last stragglers back to their cars. You stay a little longer, letting the warmth rise through the soles of your boots. Somewhere beneath the laughter and the sulphur and the commerce, the volcano dreams on, patient, unbothered, timeless. Tomorrow the crowd will return and it will perform its miracle again. Steam, applause, retreat. Maybe that's not denial, maybe it's devotion. By the time you leave the boardwalk, night has settled in for real. The sky glows with a thin wash of starlight, the kind you only see when civilization is far enough away to forget itself. You make your way back to camp slowly, drawn toward the soft sound of a fumarole sighing in the dark. It's a gentle, rhythmic hiss, almost like breathing. You sit beside it, pull your jacket close, and let the warmth creep into your bones. Sleep comes quickly here, but it's the kind of half-conscious drifting that feels more like falling between worlds than resting. Steam curls around your face, and before you realize it, the fumarole has become a dream, its whisper deepening into something almost like a voice. At first it's indistinct, just vibrations without words, but then they begin to form. The volcano is speaking, not in English, not even in sentences, but in images. You see the mantle plume as a great root of light, pulsing upward through darkness. You see magma rising like slow thunder, its heat shimmering into rivers of orange and gold. You're floating through the crust now, through chambers that glow like cathedrals. The air is molten, the walls hum, every sound is heartbeat. You think I'm asleep, the voice says, not with sound, but with movement. But I am listening. You want to ask listening to what, but before you can, the images shift. You see the surface above, the forests, the rivers, the people. Cities glow like constellations, roads curl like veins. The voice continues, "You build your homes upon my breath. You pave your prayers above my silence, and yet you call me destruction." The words vibrate through you, soft but unyielding. You try to speak, to apologize, but the dream keeps you still. "I am not anger," the voice murmurs. "I am memory. I am the heat that makes your soil, the ash that feeds your crops. I am the pressure that keeps your oceans moving." It sounds almost tired, like an old god reciting its resume to a forgetful child. Historians still argue whether ancient peoples truly believed volcanoes were deities or simply used divine language as metaphor. In this dream, the distinction doesn't matter. You believe completely. The vision shifts again. You see microbe colonies blooming in hot springs like constellations of colour. You see bison walking through snow that steams under their hooves. You see yourself, a small figure perched on a rock, trying to make sense of time with a notebook and pen. You listen better than most, the voice says, almost kindly, but you're still afraid of endings. You nod, though the motion feels like the movement of tectonic plates. "We just don't want to disappear," you whisper. The magma laughs, a low, rolling sound that feels like the earth chuckling in its sleep. "Everything disappears," it says, "but nothing is lost." The vision widens. You're floating above the planet now, watching continents drift, seas open and close, mountains rise and erode. Every eruption births another island. Every extinction clears space for something new. "Do you see?" it asks. Creation is combustion. The world breathes by burning. You do see it, and it terrifies you, but it also feels beautiful, inevitable. In the distance, a flare of light blooms, an eruption seen from above. Ash billows into the stratosphere, and yet it looks less like destruction than transformation. The plume unfolds like a flower, the petals glowing faintly against the curve of the earth. You feel the pull of gravity, of awe, of surrender. The voice softens. You are made of the same matter as my fire. The same pressure holds you together. Do not fear what made you. You open your mouth to answer, but the vision starts to dissolve. The heat fades. The light dims. You're sinking upward now, as if rising through layers of time. The magma's voice trails after you. When I wake again, you will call it an ending. But I will be beginning something else. The words echo as you drift back to the surface. You wake to dawn's thin grey light filtering through the steam. Your body feels heavy, your face damp with condensation. The fumarole hisses beside you, its sound identical to the voice from your dream. For a moment you half expect it to speak again. It doesn't, but the silence feels full, thick with meaning, as if the world is still talking, just too slowly for you to hear. You stand and stretch, your limbs stiff from the cold ground. The air tastes faintly metallic, and your breath rises in pale ribbons. You reach for your notebook with shaking hands and start writing, desperate to catch what fragments you can before they fade. Fire remembers its shape. We are the cooled version of a thought the planet once had. Nothing is lost. Your handwriting wavers, uneven, but you keep going. You laugh quietly then, realizing that maybe the dream wasn't prophecy or revelation. Maybe it was just your mind, steeped too long in sulfur and silence, echoing the world around it. Either way, it feels real enough. You close the notebook and hold it against your chest. The ground beneath your boots is warm, the same warmth that runs through every living thing, from magma to microbe to human heart. Good morning, you whisper to the steam, and thank you. The fumarole answers in its usual way, a steady hiss, neither greeting nor farewell. You turn toward the rising sun, its light cutting through the mist, and start walking again. The dream lingers, though, threaded through every breath. You can still hear the words, low, steady, certain. Everything disappears, but nothing is lost. You walk on, lighter now, as if carrying both the fire and the peace that follows it. The sun climbs higher, washing the steam in amber light, and by mid-morning the whole basin seems to shimmer. You've shaken off most of the dream, yet some of its warmth lingers behind your ribs, an afterglow of something older than language. You keep walking, drawn by a low sound that doesn't belong to wind or water. It's deeper, steadier, the kind of sound the body feels before the ears do. You stop. The ground under you vibrates, slow, deliberate, unmistakable. A tremor. At first it's gentle, like someone knocking politely from below. Pebbles skip once, twice, and settle. Then another pulse, stronger. The air goes still. Birds stop mid-song. You can taste metal on your tongue. You know this probably means nothing. Hundreds of microquakes rattle this park every month. Statistically, you should shrug it off, but logic and adrenaline rarely attend the same school. Your heart accelerates anyway. The shaking fades. Silence rushes in behind it like a tide. You exhale, laugh nervously. Okay, noted, you tell the ground. Message received. The Earth characteristically doesn't reply. Historians still argue whether moments like this, when people sense quakes seconds before instruments register them, prove that humans have some vestigial instinct for seismic change. Ancient accounts describe dogs howling, horses bolting, people freezing mid-sentence right before the world moved. Scientists call it coincidence. Poets call it intuition. You feel inclined toward the latter. You continue walking, each step tentative now, as if the crust might sigh again. The air has changed. You can feel it, denser somehow, charged. Steam vents that were whispering at dawn now roar softly, their exhalations thicker, wetter. Maybe it's just temperature fluctuation. Maybe it's pressure redistribution. Or maybe, just maybe, the sleeping giant is rolling over in its dream. You reach a viewpoint overlooking the geyser field. The plumes are larger than yesterday, merging into a single haze that blurs horizon and sky. Somewhere in that pale cloud, the volcano's breath quickens. Below, a group of researchers bustle around a cluster of sensors. One of them waves toward another, shouting something you can't hear over the hiss. Their gestures look urgent but controlled, like surgeons conferring mid-operation. A voice crackles from the radio clipped to your pack, the public safety frequency you tuned into days ago out of curiosity. Seismic swarm registering north of Biscuit Basin, someone says. Series of events, magnitude 1.8 to 2.6. Continue monitoring. Nothing catastrophic, not yet, but the phrasing series of events hangs in your mind like a half-finished sentence. You sit on a rock to steady yourself, heart still ticking a little too fast. You remind yourself that you're witnessing a pulse, not a prophecy. Every living thing's heartbeat quickens sometimes. Still, the land feels awake in a new way, alert, electric. A bison herd grazes a few hundred yards away, oblivious. Their calm helps. You watch them, their breath steaming in the cool air. One lifts its head briefly, ears twitching, then lowers it again. Whatever it sensed, it decided it wasn't worth running from. You take the hint. A ranger's ATV hums up the road, tires spitting gravel. The driver, young, focused, pulls over to speak with you. You felt that one? She asks. You nod. She glances at a handheld tablet displaying jagged lines. Been like this all morning, nothing serious, just chatter. She grins. The mountain's stretching. Stretching, you repeat. That's a nice way to say it. She shrugs. Better than saying groaning. Then she drives off, dust rising behind her, leaving you with a smile and an uneasy calm. You stay there a while longer, letting the rhythm of the place settle back into you. The tremors continue, faint and infrequent, like the pulse of a huge creature sleeping lightly. Each one seems to align with your own breathing. Inhale, quiver, exhale, still. A fringe belief flickers through memory, something about geomagnetic sensitivity, the idea that humans unconsciously sync to the Earth's field during seismic activity. Most scientists dismiss it, yet part of you wonders. You certainly feel synced now, as though the planet's nerves and yours share a circuit. You look up. The sky has turned strange, clouds building in long, thin streaks, the sunlight filtering through them in bronze sheets. Even the birds circle lower, as if confused by the shimmer in the air. You mutter, "Don't get poetic, it's just weather," but the reassurance sounds hollow. Another tremor rolls through, sharper this time, a quick jolt that lifts dust from the ground. You steady yourself against a tree, heart hammering. The vibration fades almost instantly, replaced by a deeper silence than before. And then comes the sound. It's not thunder, not exactly. More like the echo of something immense shifting miles below. A subterranean groan, low enough to feel in your teeth. It lasts maybe 3 seconds, then nothing. The world exhales again. Historians still argue whether people living near ancient eruptions could hear magma moving before the blast. Some accounts from Santorini and Krakatoa mention the voice of the mountain, an infrasonic hum days before catastrophe. Maybe it's folklore, maybe it's geology with better acoustics. You can't decide which version comforts you more. You check your watch, though you're not sure why. Time feels elastic now, stretched between calm and potential. Somewhere, satellites are already measuring the ground's rise to the millimeter, translating this moment into data. But up here, without graphs or alarms, it feels simpler, the planet taking a deeper breath. You sit back down, cross-legged, eyes closed. The ground under you is warm. You imagine you're sitting on the volcano's heartbeat, listening to its tempo accelerate. It's not panic you feel anymore, but awe. The dizzy kind that edges into prayer. You whisper, "It's okay, I'm still listening." The breeze answers, carrying the faint hiss of a vent, the whisper of grass bending. The pressure eases. You open your eyes. The light returns to ordinary gold. The tremors fade into memory. Maybe that was the mountain's version of a sigh, a reminder to pay attention, not to panic. You rise, brush dust from your hands, and laugh quietly. "Fine," you say to the horizon. "You win. I'll stop pretending this isn't sacred." And as if to agree, the earth goes utterly still. The stillness lingers longer than it should, stretching thin until it starts to hum in your ears. The bison freeze mid-graze. Steam rises in ribbons that don't move with the wind because there isn't any. You've felt quiet before, but not like this. This is the kind that carries its own weight. Then a sound reaches you, a dull, percussive thump from deep beneath the basin. Not loud, not cinematic, but heavy enough to ripple through your bones. Another follows, softer, like a heartbeat gone out of sync. Dust trembles loose from a nearby branch. You stand there, halfway between fascination and the urge to run, and realize that even if you wanted to, there's nowhere to go. The radio at your hip crackles again. Minor harmonic tremor detected. Repeat, harmonic tremor. You know enough geology now to translate. Magma is moving, gas is finding space, the earth is clearing its throat. Historians still argue whether the big one begins with violence or with patience. The stories always dramatize suddenness, Pompeii, Krakatoa, but most real eruptions start like this. A murmur mistaken for silence, a pause before a paragraph that never stops unfolding. You crouch, hand pressed to the ground. It's warm, not the comforting heat you've grown used to, but feverish, almost pulsing. The tremors return in shallow waves. Pebbles skitter across the dirt, forming tiny avalanches at your boots. You whisper, "Easy," as if that will help. And then, without warning, the geysers all across the basin erupt at once. Columns of water leap skyward, glowing gold in the late afternoon light. Steam roars across the valley like applause turned into wind. For a moment it looks like celebration, like the planet performing for itself. The air smells of wet stone and sulfur. You're drenched in mist within seconds. Every sense ignites. The sound is so immense it stops being sound, becomes pressure, becomes presence. It fills your chest, your skull, your entire idea of existence. You laugh, an involuntary, breathless sound of awe and disbelief. "You're awake," you shout over the roar, "aren't you?" The earth doesn't answer with words, but the vibrations deepen, becoming a resonant hum that you can feel in the fillings of your teeth. It's not destructive, not yet, just enormous, ancient motion. The geysers begin to calm one by one, the steam thinning until only a low hiss remains. The ground stills. The fever breaks. Silence again. But it's a different silence now, one charged with aftermath, with meaning. You realize you're crying, though not from fear. It's something closer to gratitude, maybe even relief. The mountain spoke, and for now, it decided not to scream. You sit down where you are, cross-legged in the mud. Steam coils around you like breath from a giant sleeping face. The sky, astonishingly calm, glows amber at the horizon. For a moment you wonder if maybe this was the eruption. A quiet one, an invisible rearranging of pressure beneath the crust. Maybe destruction doesn't always need spectacle. Maybe the end of the world can also be just another adjustment. You think of the microbes still thriving in the boiling pools, of the bison shaking rain from their coats, of the scientists sipping lukewarm coffee over a flickering graph. Life continuing, oblivious and brave. The volcano gives, the volcano takes, the volcano waits. Historians will argue forever about what counts as an eruption. Some will say it's only when the ash clouds blot out the sun. Others will insist that every sigh of magma is an event. You're starting to side with the second group. Every breath the earth takes is monumental if you're close enough to feel it. The last light fades. The valley glows silver now, steam drifting like ghosts across the flats. You can still smell ozone, as if lightning passed through moments ago. Your pulse slows to match the quiet rhythm of the land. You whisper, "We're still here." And for the first time all day, the words sound neither defiant nor fragile. They sound factual. The volcano's calm feels less like mercy and more like partnership. The planet isn't against you, it's just busy being alive. You lean back on your hands, eyes closing. The ground beneath you is warm, steady, pulsing faintly, and that's enough. Maybe tomorrow the seismographs will tell a different story, or maybe they'll show only the echo of tonight's sigh. Either way, the world will turn. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls. The sound is thin but pure, a single note threading through steam and stars. You smile. It feels like punctuation. You take one last deep breath, tasting mineral and mist, and think about everything you've seen, the scars and the stories, the science and the superstition. You realize they're all ways of saying the same thing. The earth remembers us even when we forget to remember it. The volcano exhales once more, gentle and long. Silence after fire, you whisper back, "Good night,"